Standing before a sea of flashing cameras and eager reporters, the four most prominent figures of the Demon Lord's army prepare for their public interview. The cloaked boy reflects on the exact moment his life changed, pinpointing the very day he was publicly branded as the weakest member of their elite group. A nostalgic memory reveals the four comrades as innocent children, deeply bound together by chains of lifelong friendship. Bound by history, their tight-knit bond stems from growing up in the exact same neighborhood as inseparable childhood friends. Rising through the military ranks side by side, they eventually found themselves proudly assigned to the exact same elite squad. Believing their bond was unbreakable, the group proudly established the legendary military system known as the Four Heavenly Kings. The fearsome trio sits in imposing silence, consisting of the flash storm Luviana, the burning world Blasia, and the vengeful ocean Voganes. The deadly scorpion Capsodia is utterly blindsided when he receives sudden and shocking news of his immediate dismissal. Staring at his former friends in disbelief, Capsodia demands to know why he is being thrown out of the Four Heavenly Kings. The cold and brutal answer is delivered without hesitation, officially condemning him simply because he is considered the weakest. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the room as the word weak echoes in his mind, leaving him completely stunned. His mind flashes back to a month prior, where the squad sat confidently on stage for a high-profile PR interview concerning the Demon Lord's army. The tension in the memory builds to the critical turning point when an interviewer boldly questions who stands as the strongest of the Four Heavenly Kings. Flipping the script with malicious curiosity, an eager reporter suddenly asks the squad to identify the weakest member among them. Irritated by the rude and pointless question, the group initially scoffs at the reporter's blatant attempt to stir up drama. Trying to maintain unity, Capsodia argues that their individual strength doesn't matter since the four of them have always fought perfectly together as a team. To his absolute horror, a silent gesture destroys his world as Blasia coldly points a clawed finger directly at him. With a mocking smirk plastered across his face, Blasia publicly declares to the world that Capsodia is undeniably the weakest of the Four Heavenly Kings. What started as a single cruel joke quickly transforms into a viral phenomenon, turning Capsodia into a laughingstock among the entire demon populace. Recognizing the disastrous fallout, Capsodia realizes the theory of his weakness spiraled entirely out of control despite initially seeming like a harmless performance. Blasia fiercely blames Capsodia for the situation, arguing that having a perceived weakling in the Four Heavenly Kings severely damages the morale of the Demon Lord's army. The confrontation reaches its boiling point as the blame for the army's crumbling reputation is shifted entirely onto his shoulders. Violent magical energy flares in the war room, physically and metaphorically severing the once unbreakable bond between the four commanders. Stripped of his title and dignity, he is bluntly ordered to pack his belongings and leave the fortress immediately. Voganes twists the knife by pointing out that Capsodia is still stuck at level 1, making his dismissal inevitable while the rest of them have surpassed level 100. As tensions rise, a distressed Luviana tries to intervene before the situation with Voganes escalates any further. Refusing to harbor pointless resentment, Capsodia calmly accepts his fate and ultimately blames his own level 1 status rather than his former friends. He mournfully realizes that his lack of fancy skills is exactly why he failed to impress the Demon Lord and earn his own territory. Frustrated by his passive acceptance, one of his former comrades questions why he always acts like such a pushover. Snapping back with unexpected venom, Capsodia finally curses out his tormentors, leaving them momentarily confused by his sudden hostility. The room erupts in offended outrage at his foul mouth, prompting his former allies to furiously order him out of their sight for good. Luviana watches him in tense, heart-wrenching silence, her face lined with overwhelming guilt and sorrow. Leaning her head against his chest, Luviana tearfully apologizes to Capsodia for failing to protect him from the other's cruelty. Squeezing her eyes shut in emotional agony, she struggles to bear the heavy weight of her own helplessness. Offering her a gentle and reassuring smile, Capsodia softly thanks Luviana for caring about him until the very end. With tears welling in her eyes, Luviana silently watches her childhood friend accept his unjust exile. Leaving his prestigious title and life behind, the deadly scorpion Capsodia walks away from the towering spires of the Demon Lord's castle into the desolate night. He begins his long, lonely journey through the wilderness, contemplating the uncertain path that lies ahead. Trudging down the dirt road, he wonders what his hometown will think of his failure, resigning himself to a mundane life of farm work. Haunting whispers follow him into exile, the cruel voices of the demon populace forever branding him as the weakest. Exhausted from his ordeal, Capsodia walks back towards his property and eagerly looks forward to being healed by his pet dog Cerberus tonight. A massive explosion suddenly obliterates the building in front of him, sending debris and roaring flames into the night sky. Shocked by the sudden and utter destruction of his home, he can only utter a single breathless word of disbelief. Rushing forward in an absolute panic, he desperately demands to know what the hell is happening to his sanctuary. A towering, monstrous reptilian figure greets the deadly scorpion Capsodia, mockingly celebrating the fact that he is still alive. The beast sneers with a wide, jagged grin, directly taunting Capsodia about the widespread rumors of him being the weakest of the 4 heavenly kings. Gripped by a cold fury, Capsodia glares from beneath his hood and quietly asks if this creature is the one who burned down his house. The creature rudely brushes off the question, arrogantly demanding that Capsodia answer his questions first. Ignoring the creature's demands, Capsodia quickly deduces that this beast is working under the burning world king, Blasia. With a terrifyingly wide eye, he addresses the burning machine Bastrin directly, fiercely demanding a straight answer about his ruined home. Bastrin proudly admits to the arson under Blasia's orders, openly surprised that Capsodia can emit such an intimidating aura despite being rotten. The reptilian assassin lunges forward with a burst of fiery breath, launching his lethal assault without hesitation. Bastrin eagerly reveals his true motivation, boasting that killing Capsodia will earn him a grand promotion to become the new 4th heavenly king. Standing perfectly still amidst the violent assault, Capsodia calmly processes the brutal betrayal of his former ally. Raising his hand to summon a glowing magical seal with an icy stare, Capsodia locks onto his attacker. With a single, devastating magical command, he orders the creature dead. Capsodia points an accusatory finger outward as Bastrin stands frozen in place, coughing up a harmless puff of smoke. The creature lets out a sudden, mocking laugh as the magical attack seemingly fails to leave a scratch. Bastrin erupts into hysterical laughter, mocking the failed attack and declaring that a dud like Capsodia is exactly what you'd expect from the weakest king. Confused by the absolute lack of physical damage, Bastrin questions what Capsodia meant by his lethal command. The creature's bravado crumbles into stammering terror as he suddenly realizes the horrifying truth about the supposedly weakest king. Capsodia coldly explains that his former allies never bothered to understand how the 4 heavenly kings' elemental specialties actually functioned. With chilling calmness, he reveals that his own true specialty is the absolute power of the death attribute. Staring down at Bastrin's rapidly decaying remains, Capsodia notes that his enemy can no longer hear his explanation. Looking around the smoldering wreckage, he wonders what kind of garbage Blasia has been teaching his subordinates while reflecting that this land was only ever on loan from the Demon Lord. A deep, suffocating sense of loss washes over him as he realizes his prestigious title, his safe home, and his beloved dog are all gone. Just as he accepts that he has absolutely nothing left to his name, a familiar bark miraculously pierces the silent night. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated relief as he recognizes the sound. His giant, 3-headed pet dog, Cerberus, bounds happily toward him without a single scratch. Capsodia gratefully embraces his wildly affectionate pet, playfully noting that the dog had the excellent sense of humor to run away from a burning building. The joyful reunion turns somber as Capsodia gently reminds Cerberus that he is permanently stripped of his heavenly king status. Knowing that more assassins will undoubtedly come after him, Capsodia refuses to let his loyal pet get caught in the dangerous crossfire. He gives Cerberus a heartbreaking choice between risking their lives together or staying in the only safe place left with Luviana. The fiercely loyal Cerberus immediately rejects the safe option, aggressively headbutting Capsodia to prove his unwavering devotion. Deeply touched by the display of loyalty, Capsodia warmly welcomes his companion to join him on his perilous journey. Sitting by a quiet forest path, Capsodia realizes he has officially reached the borders separating the demon and human territories. Weighing his incredibly limited options, he considers hiding out in human territory to finally escape his relentless pursuers. Staring thoughtfully at his own hand, he reflects on his nature as a sub-dead being, a former human who eventually evolved into a semi-immortal. Knowing his ancestors were normal humans 10 generations ago, he logically concludes that human territory will be much safer than staying where his life is actively threatened. Throwing a determined punch into the air, Capsodia officially decides to forge a brand new path in the human realm. With a confident smirk spreading across his face, Capsodia prepares to face whatever obstacles lie ahead on his new path. Suddenly, a massive explosion obliterates the ground right in front of him, sending jagged debris flying in all directions. Unfazed by the violent blast, Capsodia casually notes the arrival of yet another unexpected attacker. Glancing over his shoulder with an annoyed sigh, he mutters a complaint about his incredibly bad luck today. A towering, heavily scarred brute blocks his path, casting a massive shadow over the young mage. The hulking figure arrogantly assumes Capsodia is just another one of the hero's weak companions. Refusing to listen, the giant interrupts and boasts that he has already slaughtered the hero's entire party by himself. He proudly declares himself invincible, claiming his absolute immortality comes from possessing 8 separate souls. Capsodia narrows his eyes as the brute explains his twisted dead soul's magic, which involves hoarding the stolen souls of his victims. Realizing this foul magic forcefully rips souls from the living, Capsodia quietly concludes that his opponent is a literal monster. Annoyed by Capsodia's lack of fear or recognition, the brute aggressively demands to know who he is dealing with. Realizing Capsodia now knows his deadly secret, the giant lunges forward with murderous intent to silence him permanently. Introducing himself as Vizag the Mad, the brute makes a deeply disturbing comment about his preference for young girls that leaves Capsodia utterly speechless. Ignoring the vile rant, Capsodia coldly commands him to die just as Vizag prepares his lethal strike. Vizag suddenly freezes mid-attack, his eyes bulging in agony as an unseen force violently crushes his body. Capsodia merely scratches his head in mild annoyance while the dying brute desperately stammers about his 8 extra lives. Looking down at his collapsing enemy, Capsodia wonders what kind of nonsensical logic the man was spouting. He coldly dismisses Vizag's supposed immortality, stating that death is an absolute force no matter how many lives one hoards. Vizag's massive body crumbles away against a nearby tree, entirely eradicated by the overwhelming magic. Staring into the sky, Capsodia offers a brief, solemn wish for the stolen souls to finally find peace in heaven. Brushing off the violent encounter, he quickly refocuses his attention on his immediate survival. Crouching down to loot Vizag's belongings, Capsodia sifts through medicine and human gold while complaining about the bleak surroundings. Struggling to lift the incredibly heavy magic bag, he wonders if there is a decent place to settle down nearby. Mid-thought, a sudden realization hits him regarding the hero's party that Vizag had supposedly slaughtered. Catching a fresh scent of death in the air, he slowly turns his gaze toward a nearby rocky outcrop. Resigning himself to the grim situation, he reaches into his cloak to pull out a specialized magical tool. He dramatically reveals his Shinigamicho, a dark ledger that functions exactly like a legendary book of death. Flipping through the morbid pages, he quickly locates Vizag's name to read the ledger's information on the deceased brute. Continuing his search through the rocky terrain, he scans the bleak environment for any viable shelter. To his absolute shock, he discovers a beautiful, silver-haired girl tightly shackled to the unforgiving cave wall. Connecting the dots from Vizag's earlier disturbing comments, Capsodia realizes the pervert had kidnapped this young girl. Trembling in absolute terror, the captive girl stares at the dark mage with wide, tear-filled eyes. Trying to calm her down, Capsodia quickly assures her that he is not Vizag while asking if she belongs to the hero's party. Capsodia's question trails off as he notices something far more tragic lying just out of sight. Overwhelmed by grief and fear, the young captive breaks down into uncontrollable sobs. Through her tears, she heartbreakingly reveals that the hero sacrificed herself in a desperate attempt to save her life. Turning his attention to the cave floor, Capsodia spots the battered and lifeless body of the fallen hero. Examining the captive girl more closely, he identifies her distinctive ears and tail as traits of the red wolf demihuman race. Reaching out to touch the fallen hero's body, he grimly notes that she hasn't been dead for very long. Glancing between his magical ledger and the grieving captive, Capsodia casually asks for the fallen hero's name to cross-reference his findings. Staring up with tearful and confused eyes, the captive demihuman girl hesitantly asks Capsodia what exactly he is trying to do. Consulting his dark ledger, Capsodia locates Perfimia's entry and notes that she was killed by a devastating blow from a dragon blade exactly an hour ago. Without a hint of hesitation, he writes a new fate into the magical book, simply dictating that she has miraculously come back to life after the fatal attack. A massive, brilliant magic circle suddenly erupts beneath the fallen hero's body as Capsodia executes his reality-altering command. Holding his enchanted quill and ledger, the dark mage stands completely unfazed as the overwhelming resurrection magic surges through the rocky chamber. Gasping violently for air, the red wolf hero suddenly jolts awake on the cavern floor with a loud, hacking cough. Closing his ledger with a satisfied demeanor, Capsodia casually notes that the hero is finally back among the living. The captive demihuman girl stares at the revived hero in absolute disbelief, whispering that what she just witnessed is completely impossible. She mentally reels from the shock, Recognizing that performing such a great resurrection magic without a holy altar or relic is a miraculous feat impossible for even 100 high-ranking priests. Overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the impossible miracle, she stares at Capsodia's back and desperately wonders who the hell this terrifyingly powerful man truly is. The captive blonde girl stares in awe at the newly revived red wolf demihuman, utterly unable to believe her own eyes. Tears of sheer disbelief and joy stream down the captive girl's face as she processes the impossible miracle. Shifting her gaze to the hooded mage, she desperately wonders who this mysterious savior truly is. Capsodia awkwardly averts his gaze and stammers quietly, unsure of how to handle her intense scrutiny. Still reeling from the shock, the captive explicitly asks how he performed high-tier resurrection magic without using a holy relic. Capsodia silently reflects on how human territory strictly forbids resurrection magic due to ethical concerns. He casually explains that back in the demon army, his sole duty was to revive 1,000 dead soldiers every day to combat their low fertility rate. A grim flashback shows Capsodia endlessly casting his revival spell over massive piles of fallen demon warriors. Trapped in a monotonous cycle of war, he tirelessly brought souls back from the dead without a single moment of rest. He bitterly recalls that his constant overwork left him permanently stuck at level 1 with a combat record of absolute 0. The relentless magical strain eventually caused his body to give out, leading directly to his unfair dismissal from the Heavenly Kings. Snapping back to the present, Capsodia brushes off his past and notes they are extremely lucky he arrived before the body started decomposing. Overwhelmed with immense gratitude, the blonde girl beams a tearful smile and mistakenly praises him as a divine saint. Capsodia freezes in place, completely stunned by the holy title suddenly bestowed upon him. He awkwardly clarifies that he is actually a demon and a former heavenly king, leaving the girls utterly speechless. Overcome with emotion from being genuinely thanked for the first time in his life, Capsodia bursts into tears and tells himself to suck it up. The heartwarming moment is interrupted when the priestess suddenly realizes the red wolf girl is still suffering from her previous fatal injuries. Still shackled to the cave wall, the captive priestess politely asks Capsodia to release her from her heavy iron chains so she can help. Once freed, she immediately raises her hands and begins softly chanting a radiant, wind-based healing incantation. Gathering her remaining spiritual energy, she calls upon the light of blessing to mend her companion's lingering wounds. She successfully casts the breath of the great god, leaving Capsodia completely shocked that such a young girl possesses top-tier priest magic. Holding the fully healed red wolf girl close, the priestess tearfully apologizes for being too weak to protect her earlier. The young priestess bravely frames their suffering as a divine trial, deeply grateful that they both managed to survive. Realizing the misunderstanding, the red wolf girl points to Capsodia and insists that he is the true saint who resurrected her from the dead. Formally introducing herself as Sharon Strong, a servant of God, the holy priestess politely asks for her demonic savior's name. Capsodia stares in absolute horror as he recognizes her name, realizing this supposedly innocent girl is the legendary prophecy of the Holy Maiden. He recalls that this famous maiden's terrifyingly accurate prophecies have single-handedly caused massive, humiliating defeats for the Demon Lord's army. Observing the Red Wolf girl, Capsodia concludes that the Holy Maiden specifically chose this seemingly uninterested demihuman to act as the official hero. Trying to maintain his composure, Capsodia begins to introduce himself, slowly uttering the first syllable of his name. Without warning, he violently coughs up a spray of blood, his fragile level 1 body buckling under the immense strain of his previous magical exertion. Wiping the blood from his mouth, he quickly pivots and introduces himself as Capua, deeply relieved he didn't expose his true demonic identity. Believing his sudden illness is nothing serious, both girls respectfully bow and enthusiastically greet their fragile savior as Lord Capua. Internally sweating, Capsodia realizes his new peaceful life has disastrously started by befriending the Demon Lord's absolute greatest enemies. Deciding to cut ties immediately, he plans to escort the dangerous duo to the nearest city and quietly disappear into the background. He awkwardly waves off their continued thanks, but the Red Wolf girl anxiously suggests they flee before the monstrous Visage returns. Trembling in fear, she desperately warns them about the brute's devastating dragon fangs blade that previously took her life. Capsodia casually mentions he already killed the monster, leaving the girls completely awestruck that he defeated a level 110 enemy. A heavy silence falls over the group as the girls process his bold claim alongside the startling revelation of his actual level. Assuming he is just being humble, the Red Wolf girl nervously laughs off his claim as another one of his eccentric jokes. Glancing down, Capsodia sighs inwardly as he catches the inquisitive holy maiden secretly using appraisal magic to verify his stats. Staring in absolute horror, the holy maiden turns pale as she finally processes the reality of his incredibly low stats. Panicking over the sheer impossibility of the situation, she desperately questions how a level 1 mage managed to defeat such a monstrous enemy. Grasping at straws, the blonde priestess loudly concludes that he must be an incredibly experienced tactician with vast combat knowledge. Capsodia stares at her with a dumbfounded expression, utterly confused by her wild and completely inaccurate assumption. She confidently insists that utilizing brilliant tactics is the only logical explanation for a level 1 warrior overcoming such an evil foe. Meanwhile, the revived Red Wolf hero stares up at Capsodia with sparkling, starstruck eyes. Sensing the impending trouble, Capsodia immediately tries to shut down the conversation before it spirals any further. Ignoring his reluctance entirely, the demi-human girl tackles him into a tight hug and loudly begs him to make her his apprentice. Capsodia inwardly groans as his brand new life in human territory officially kicks off with the worst possible encounter between a hero and a holy maiden. The unlikely trio eventually arrives at the bustling gates of Neuville, a lively frontier town situated perfectly for his fresh start. Walking through the stone streets, they are greeted by the cheerful sights of playing children and happy townsfolk going about their day. Offering a rare, genuine smile from beneath his hood, the former demon commander silently notes that this peaceful town is exactly what he needs. Desperately trying to shake off his unwanted follower, Capsodia firmly repeats that he is still undergoing training himself and absolutely cannot take on an apprentice. Reaching a busy intersection, he formally thanks them for the escort and politely attempts to part ways for good. Refusing to accept the rejection, the childish hero throws a massive tantrum, flailing wildly on the ground while screaming that she doesn't want to leave him. Stepping in to calm the situation, the holy maiden quickly deduces that Capsodia is planning to look for a job in their town. Seizing the opportunity, she cheerfully suggests that they all head to the local adventurers guild together. She explains that the guild is the perfect place to register as adventurers and pick up paying jobs. Utterly baffled by their detour, Capsodia questions why the legendary hero isn't out trying to defeat the demon lord right now. Stepping protectively in front of her companion, the priestess explains that their grand quest has hit a major roadblock. Looking downcast, the Red Wolf girl admits that her recent fatal encounter with Visage made her realize she severely lacks the battle experience needed to fight strong demons. Capsodia silently agrees with her assessment, knowing firsthand that despite her terrifying potential, she requires a ludicrous amount of training to survive. The priestess reveals their new plan to grind for experience by completing standard monster subjugation requests as registered adventurers. Capsodia firmly draws a line in the sand, clarifying that they are only traveling together until they actually reach the guild doors. Refusing to budge on the matter, he makes it completely clear that their temporary alliance ends the second they arrive. The Red Wolf girl gleefully hugs his arm in celebration, leaving Capsodia blushing furiously as her chest presses tightly against him. Standing before a large stone building, the group successfully locates their destination and prepares to head inside. Chatting excitedly about their journey, the girls follow an incredibly annoyed Capsodia toward the entrance. Pushing against the heavy wooden double doors, they slowly force the entrance open with a loud creak. Inside, the spacious guild hall is packed with rowdy mercenaries, bustling merchants, and heavily armed warriors taking a break. A polite, glasses-wearing elven receptionist greets them warmly from behind the main counter, welcoming them to the guild. Scanning the chaotic room, Capsodia reflects that while he has done reconnaissance in human territory before, he has never actually stepped inside a guild. Surprised that he isn't already a registered member, the receptionist listens as Capsodia plainly states he is looking for a job. Leaning against the counter, the dark mage happily dreams of finding a peaceful, non-exploitative job so he can finally graduate from his past murderous lifestyle. Clearing his throat, he awkwardly introduces himself using his fake name, Capua, while explicitly stating he doesn't have a last name. Maintaining her cheerful professional demeanor, the receptionist asks the former demon general to hand over his academic records. Capsodia freezes in pure confusion as she rapidly lists off requirements for letters of recommendation, labor union affiliations, and official qualifications. Realizing he has absolutely nothing to offer, the receptionist's smile drops into a deeply apologetic frown. Panic sets in as Capsodia nervously asks if there are truly 0 jobs available for someone with his complete lack of credentials. Sweating slightly, the receptionist holds up a pathetic flyer and a couple of tin cans, offering him the lowest possible position as the designated cat feeder. Capsodia is dismayed to learn that the designated cat feeder position pays so little that the cat probably earns more than he does. The elven receptionist cheerfully reassures him that he can still become a high-ranking adventurer with a simple test, promising that living in a mansion is a completely achievable goal. The hero and the holy maiden lean in with wide, expectant smiles, eager to see what he will do next. The two girls flash massive grins at him, completely thrilled by the prospect of him joining the guild. Capsodia clicks his tongue in deep annoyance, visibly sweating under their intense and overwhelming expectations. Raising her arms in sheer excitement, the Red Wolf girl cheers loudly at his reluctant decision to become an adventurer. While the hero excitedly anticipates going on adventures together, Capsodia privately resolves to plan his jobs carefully just to avoid his overly clingy companions. The receptionist steps forward to explain that they will conduct a simple test to check if he possesses the necessary qualities to become an adventurer. She instructs him to simply hold his hand above a magical device, assuring him that he doesn't need to think too hard about the process. Panic briefly sets in as Capsodia realizes the test might expose his high-ranked magic and reveal his true identity as a demon. Seizing the moment, Perfimia boldly volunteers to take the magic test first, much to the receptionist's delight. Eager to gauge the device's level, Capsodia watches closely as the enthusiastic hero reaches her hand out toward the gleaming crystal sphere. A blinding surge of magical energy erupts from the sphere the moment Perfimia's hand hovers over it, forcing everyone in the room to brace themselves against the shockwave. The guild hall erupts into a clamor of awe as onlookers marvel at the unprecedented, noble white light radiating from the device. The receptionist watches the dazzling display in amazement, noting that the guild's decision will be based directly on the capabilities shown by the magic device. The crowd stares in absolute disbelief, desperately wondering what kind of extraordinary being could produce such an intense reaction. Still reeling from the shock, the bystanders can only mutter their sheer amazement at the miraculous display. Celebrating the best outcome ever recorded, the guild members tearfully declare a 3-day party, recognizing that those who achieve this result always go on to become legendary heroes. The astonishing result perfectly confirms Sharon's prophecy, cementing Perfimia's destined role as the chosen hero. Recognizing the Holy Maiden's divine presence, the receptionist warmly smiles and asks if she is the legendary saintess of prophecy, Sharon Stoneegg. The guild erupts into chaotic chatter as the flustered girls quickly apologize for the commotion and formally introduce Perfimia Primal as the chosen hero. The hero eagerly urges the receptionist to appraise her master next, explaining that they joined the guild specifically to help Perfimia gain much-needed battle experience. The entire guild falls completely silent, absolutely terrified by the realization that this mysterious, hooded man is the master of the legendary hero. Watching the device gleam quietly, Capsodia internally decides that he should be fine taking the test now that the initial shock has passed. He casually holds his hand over the crystal sphere, only to trigger a sudden, blinding flash of light. The hero and holy maiden shield their eyes in absolute awe, loudly praising the divine light and celebrating the expected brilliance of their master. Sweating nervously, Capsodia stares at the bizarre reaction, realizing with dread that his result looks entirely different from Perfimia's. A dark, ominous aura bleeds from the crystal, filling the air with a deeply unsettling and cursed energy. With wide, horrified eyes, Capsodia and his companions stare in absolute disbelief at the horrifying manifestation before them. The magical device displays the shockingly crude message "Damn, just damn," for the entire room to see. The elven receptionist and a nearby adventurer freeze in absolute shock, their eyes widening as they read the unprecedented assessment. The entire guild erupts in confusion as the crowd realizes this bizarre message is a completely brand new phrase never seen before. Capsodia stares blankly at his own result, uttering a confused sound as he fails to comprehend the device's cryptic meaning. The surrounding adventurers lean in closely, their faces painted with sheer disbelief as they process the impossible outcome. Shouts of sheer amazement ripple through the crowd as the seasoned mercenaries completely lose their composure over the strange magic reading. Staring at the device, the veteran receptionist frantically wonders if this mysterious new phrase is even recorded in the official guild manual. Completely misunderstanding the crude message, Perfimia excitedly cheers for her master's amazing result while Capsodia remains utterly baffled. Blushing furiously, Sharon the Holy Maiden steps forward and breathlessly asks if Capsodia is the legendary savior sent by God to change their guild's history. The growing commotion is suddenly interrupted by the heavy, imposing approach of a towering, muscular old man covered in scars. A tense silence falls over the room as the scarred veteran glares forward with a terrifyingly serious expression. The whispering crowd immediately parts to make way for the intimidating figure. The adventurers respectfully identify the imposing man as Mackenzie, the legendary X-Silver ranked adventurer and current guild master. Stepping heavily toward the group, the towering guild master asserts his dominant presence over the chaotic scene. Mackenzie completely ignores Capsodia and instead creeps up to grope the hero, casually praising her physical proportions. As the receptionist quickly introduces Parfumia, the old man continues his wildly inappropriate behavior without a shred of shame. Turning his attention toward the Holy Maiden, the guild master briefly pauses to acknowledge Sharon's divine status. Capsodia watches in sheer disgust as the supposedly legendary master reveals himself to be nothing more than a horny old pervert. The receptionist quickly redirects the old man's attention, formally introducing Capsodia as the adventurer who triggered the mysterious new phrase. Mackenzie's cheerful demeanor instantly vanishes, replaced by a scowl of utter disappointment as he bluntly declares that Capsodia looks completely worthless. The guild master brutally roasts the young mage, pointing out his frail body, lifeless eyes, and absolute lack of a strong aura. Capsodia internally fumes at the insults, silently defending his lifeless eyes by reminding himself that he is literally a half-dead demolic. Mackenzie strokes his beard in deep thought, wondering if the unprecedented phrase indicates a godlike affinity or something completely sinister. The old man's eyes narrow suspiciously as he suggests the phrase might mean Capsodia is a damned being or even a member of the demon race. A cold sweat breaks out across Capsodia's face as he loudly gulps, absolutely terrified that his true identity has been instantly exposed. The tension shatters as Mackenzie bursts into hearty laughter, completely dismissing his own accurate deduction as a ridiculous joke. Desperate to finish registering and leave, Capsodia nervously tries to change the subject, only to be distracted by a faint, familiar buzzing sound. A massive, grotesque fly circles the room, its irritating buzzing completely derailing the dark mage's train of thought. Refocusing on business, Mackenzie politely interrupts the Holy Maiden and officially challenges Capsodia to a spar. The guildmaster solemnly declares that it is his absolute duty to test whether this strange newcomer harbors any evil intentions. Staring intensely at the young mage, Mackenzie prepares to judge his true character through the upcoming combat trial. Misinterpreting Capsodia's distracted glare, the old man assumes his new opponent is fiercely eager to fight. Capsodia glares intensely from beneath his hood, his eyes practically glowing with a terrifying, murderous intent. The hero and the surrounding adventurers marvel at Capsodia's overwhelming bloodlust, believing he is taking the guildmaster's challenge incredibly seriously. In reality, Capsodia is completely ignoring the old man and focusing all his murderous rage directly on the annoying fly. He internally curses his half-dead demonic nature, realizing that his faint corpse-like scent acts as an irresistible magnet for the disgusting insects. Furious that his eternal rival has followed him all the way into human territory, Capsodia aggressively prepares to swat the bug out of existence. The buzzing insect swiftly evades his initial attempts, flying erratically through the tense guild hall. The oblivious fly ultimately lands squarely on the bald, shiny head of the bowing guildmaster. Locking onto his tiny target with terrifying intensity, Capsodia unleashes a deeply menacing glare. Reacting to the sudden provocation, Capsodia instinctually moves to swat the irritating fly, unleashing a devastating wave of dormant power. The powerful shockwave violently smashes into Guildmaster Mackenzie, sending the veteran flying backward through the air with a resounding crash. Mackenzie desperately tries to brace himself against the overwhelming force, utterly shocked that his ex-silver-ranked instincts are completely failing him. The mighty shockwave violently slams the seasoned guild master headfirst into the solid wooden floorboards. Mackenzie is buried waist-deep in the wreckage of the smashed floor, leaving his limbs thrashing uselessly in the crater. Knocked completely out of commission by a single accidental strike, the defeated guildmaster can only let out muffled, incoherent gibberish. The surrounding onlookers and the elven receptionist gape in utter horror, their jaws dropping at the sight of the legendary master defeated in one blow. The dazed and battered guild master weakly confirms his defeat, acknowledging the mysterious strength behind the attack. Meanwhile, Capsodia inspects his own hand where the fly narrowly escaped, while an ecstatic Parfumia excitedly praises his incredible display of power. Staring at the chaotic aftermath, the stunned onlookers wonder who the hooded newcomer truly is as Mackenzie mournfully admits the insect got away. Standing over the ruined floor, Capsodia glares down at the hidden old man and sarcastically asks if he is trying to hide his embarrassment. Panicking inwardly, Capsodia sweats over the realization that he may have accidentally pulverized the most important big shot in the entire town. A brief expository diagram highlights the biological reality of demoliches, who naturally possess terrifying superhuman strength born from being half-dead. Struggling to pull himself from the debris, the bruised guild master checks on the young mage, admitting that Capsodia accidentally unleashed his true limiter while swatting at a pest. Utterly bewildered by the bizarre turn of events, Capsodia thrashes in frustration at the old man's completely misplaced concern. Groveling in the wreckage, Mackenzie formally declares that Capsodia effortlessly passes the special examination and completely understands his true capabilities. Complaining that the single punch nearly made his own demonic life flash before his eyes, Capsodia questions if handing out such an extreme rank is genuinely acceptable. Leaning in with an overly familiar smile, the Red Wolf hero cheers that this means they can finally go on grand adventures together. Reeling in disbelief, Capsodia frantically rejects the notion while the receptionist politely offers her congratulations on the massive promotion. Trembling nervously, the elven receptionist struggles to maintain her composure amid the unprecedented guild promotion. Apologizing to the Holy Maiden, Mackenzie stammers through his words as he tries to explain that his sudden outburst was driven purely by deep worry for the mysterious newcomer. Giving a gentle pat on the head, Capsodia reassures the flustered priestess and praises her for being such a genuinely kind person. Snapping back to reality, the guild master flips through official paperwork to finalize the administrative decision. Tossing a high-tier emblem through the air, Mackenzie tells the reluctant dark mage to catch and accept the honor he has rightfully earned. The surrounding crowd gasps in absolute pandemonium as they realize the newcomer has just been instantly awarded a prestigious silver-ranked badge. Horrified by the sudden promotion, Capsodia panics at the thought of how badly this high-caliber badge will make him stand out in public. Shrieking in pure dismay, he violently refuses the silver emblem, complaining that the badge itself even smells faintly and strangely off-putting. Dumbfounded by his refusal, Perfimia loudly calls out the old man for having loose screws while pointing out that turning down a silver rank is utter madness. Pointing an accusing finger, Capsodia demands to know how the guild master plans to take responsibility after putting him through such abusive special tests. Declaring his lack of confidence in handling high-level work right out of the gate, Capsodia insists on starting at the bottom as a basic iron-ranked adventurer. Stepping in to defuse the argument, the elven receptionist frantically confirms to Mackenzie that she already personally appraised his true stats. The shocked guild master stammers in disbelief upon learning that the terrifying powerhouse standing before him is registered at a mere level 1. Listening to the receptionist and the Holy Maiden explain the situation, Mackenzie strokes his chin and begins to reconsider his approach. Leaping into the air with sudden enthusiasm, Perfimia cheerfully declares that she is completely fine dropping down to an iron rank as well. The receptionist quickly reminds everyone that Perfimia's exceptional potential already qualifies her to be ranked well above the bronze tier. Firmly placing a hand on her shoulder, Capsodia tells the clinging hero that she needs to start by registering as a bronze-ranked adventurer. Explaining his reasoning, he emphasizes that the present moment calls for her to build competence independently rather than leaning on others. Looking up with wide, tearful eyes, the young demihuman questions if she must truly embark on this dangerous path entirely on her own. With a soft, serious expression, Capsodia warns her that guiding her step-by-step right now would only stunt her long-term growth by making her entirely reliant on him. Flashing a reassuring thumbs up, Capsodia warmly tells her he eagerly looks forward to witnessing her personal growth once she claws her way up to his level first. Sharon walks confidently forward, already plotting his next calculated move. Grinning wickedly, he noted that everything was proceeding exactly as planned while his disciple enthusiastically promised to do her best. He envisioned Perfimia's top-notch potential eventually earning her an audience with the king, leading to a glamorous royal life filled with parades and high society events. Anticipating her promotion to heroine status, he gleefully imagined her forgetting him entirely, allowing him to quietly enjoy an unexploited life. Meanwhile, an official presented Perfimia with an urgent quest, prompting her to accept it with unwavering enthusiasm. Cheering her on, Sharon praised her spirit while the official warned that the upcoming opponent might be extremely difficult for a novice. Stepping forward, the official described the target as a hulking yet incredibly intelligent man. He ominously revealed that the formidable foe wielded a terrifying dragon-toothed sword. Adding to the danger, the official noted that the warrior excelled in using deadly death attribute magic. Furthermore, intelligence reports indicated that the monstrous target possessed a staggering 8 souls. Revealing the target's identity, the official announced him as Vizag, a fearsome berserker boasting a 3-digit level. Clarifying the timeline, the official assured them that the dangerous quest did not need to be completed immediately. Interrupting the grim briefing, Perfimia hesitantly broke the news with an incredibly sheepish grin. Shocking the official, she casually revealed that the mighty Vizag had already been utterly defeated. Pointing proudly at her mentor, Euphemia declared that her master was the one who effortlessly took the berserker down. Stunned silence enveloped the room as the official stared at Sharon in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. Meanwhile, on a chaotic battlefield, massive explosions violently tore through the war-torn landscape. Unleashing a devastating nebula storm, a fierce warrior decimated the front lines of the enemy ranks. Caught completely off guard, human soldiers screamed in terror as the overwhelming magic shattered their defenses. Frustrated by the senseless destruction, Ruviana barked at Vognis to deploy the army instead of recklessly spamming his tidal wave attack. Furious at his blatant insubordination, Ruviana demanded to know why Vognis was completely ignoring their agreed-upon battle plan. Shrugging off her intense anger, Vognis casually argued that slaughtering the humans was the only objective that truly mattered. Snapping under the mounting pressure, Ruviana screamed his name in absolute, unbridled fury. Startled by her explosive outburst, Vognis hastily backed down and agreed to follow her orders. Observing the disaster, Ruviana realized Vognis was completely unsuited for backline command, especially since their resurrections were severely lagging behind. Muttering bitterly to herself, she lamented that no one grasped the gravity of the situation and desperately wished Capsodia had drafted their strategy. Recalling his brilliance, she remembered how Capsodia always delivered flawless battle proposals before every major conflict regardless of his heavy workload. Realizing their true dynamic, she admitted that Capsodia was the actual mastermind behind the army's functionality, making the rest of them mere extras. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield, narrowly missing Ruviana as a fiery ally violently intervened. Touching down amidst the thick smoke, Brazel calmly assessed the crumbling front line. Expressing immense relief, Ruviana thanked Brazel for the timely rescue while he firmly ordered Vognis to return to the vanguard. Stripping Vognis of his temporary command, Brazel coldly stated that the aquatic warrior was entirely failing to issue proper orders. Annoyed by the sudden demotion, Vognis sarcastically asked if Brazel intended to take charge of the chaotic battlefield himself. Rejecting the role, Brazel officially delegated the army's command to Ruviana while arrogantly reminding them of his own supreme authority. Correcting him sharply, Ruviana warned Brazel not to mistake his rank, asserting that the Demon King was the true supreme commander over them all. Smirking slightly, Brazel agreed with her technicality while defending himself against accusations of disrespecting their dark sovereign. A tense silence lingered as the monstrous commanders stared each other down amidst the smoldering ruins. Breaking the standoff, Brazel announced his immediate departure to the Demon Lord city, completely ignoring Ruviana's protests about the remaining enemy forces. Mocking her misplaced priorities, Brazel accused Ruviana of failing to understand the true, world-shifting value of his secretive projects. Promising a terrifying future, Brazel vowed that his mysterious creations would fundamentally change the very nature of war itself. Left alone in the devastation, Ruviana gazed into the distance and desperately pleaded for Capsodia to tell her where their dark path was leading. Morning officially arrived as peaceful bird chirps echoed outside the quiet inn. Waking up after a night of intense questioning about the Vizag incident, he noted that they all shared an inn room due to their lack of funds. Hearing a desperate voice calling him to wake up, he groggily opened his eyes. Blinking away the sleep, he found his disciple Euphemia leaning directly over him. Her face was uncomfortably close as she stared down at her master with deep concern. Startled by her sudden shout, his eyes shot wide open in complete panic. He internally screamed, utterly bewildered by whatever Euphemia was attempting to do. The morning light filtered through the window as he shot up with a violent jolt. Thrilled by his awakening, Euphemia tearfully celebrated that he had come back to life, leaving him completely confused about why she was in his room. Flustered by her clingy behavior, he nervously wondered if she was trying to become more than just his disciple. Deluding himself entirely, he wildly speculated that his transition to the human territory had finally awakened his long-awaited popular phase. Blushing furiously, Euphemia apologized for her overexcitement while he desperately tried to calm her down. To his absolute shock, both Euphemia and Sharon suddenly burst into loud, wailing tears right in front of him. Trying to regain control of the chaotic situation, he firmly asked the sobbing girls to explain what exactly had happened. Still bawling uncontrollably, they revealed the terrifying truth that his heart had completely stopped beating during the night. He froze in stunned silence, his mind completely blanking as he processed the absurd revelation. Sniffling pitifully, they explained that they had pressed their bodies against his freezing form just to warm him up. An uncomfortable tension settled over the room as the bizarre reality of their intimate rescue mission sank in. Panic flooded his mind as he suddenly realized the catastrophic consequences if they discovered his true undead demonic nature. Scrambling for an excuse, he frantically deduced that his true identity hadn't been exposed just yet. Pushing aside his chaotic thoughts, he firmly etched their tearful faces into his memory to fuel his upcoming deception. Putting on a brave face, he assured the crying girls that he was perfectly fine and apologized for causing them unnecessary worry. Shocking them both, he boldly claimed that stopping his own heart was actually a deliberate technique he had mastered during his past mountain training. Perfimia gasped in utter disbelief as he confidently doubled down on his ridiculous story. Weaving a complex lie, he explained that surviving instant death attribute magic required his body to adapt to extreme, lethal conditions. He proudly declared that his body already knew how to resuscitate itself even if an enemy spell forcefully stopped his heart. Glancing sideways, he nervously checked to see if they were actually buying his outrageous fabrication. To his immense relief, both girls looked at him with sheer awe, blindly accepting his ridiculous explanation. Showering him in praise for his supposed coolness, they completely failed to notice his deep internal shame over manipulating their naive gullibility. Suddenly remembering her morning chores, Perfimia hurriedly excused herself to finish her delayed preparations. Curious about her sudden rush, he asked what she was doing, to which she cheerfully announced she was making bread. Impressed by her domestic skills, he quietly acknowledged that her versatile cooking abilities made her an incredibly helpful companion. Suddenly losing her balance, Sharon clumsily tripped and let out a surprised yelp as she wobbled forward. Catching her securely before she could fall, he gently advised her not to push herself too hard as she bashfully thanked him. Perfimia sadly explained that Sharon had spent her entire life sheltered inside the royal palace after inheriting the heavy powers of the Saintess of Prophecy. Realizing the tragic weight of her sheltered existence, he quietly sympathized with the intense trauma she carried after losing all her attendants to Vizag. Breaking the somber mood, Perfimia triumphantly presented a steaming, freshly baked loaf of bread to the group. The delicious, warm aroma filled the room, instantly lifting everyone's spirits after the chaotic morning. Tearing aggressively into the warm bread, he took a massive, eager bite with wide eyes. Cheeks stuffed full of food, he happily declared the meal to be absolutely delicious while Perfimia giggled with pride. He eagerly chewed his soft bread, silently marveling at how long it had been since he enjoyed such a decent, delicious meal. Memories of the demon territory suddenly flashed through his mind, recalling how he was so buried in endless work that he only survived on bland nutrient supplements. Snapping back to reality, he stared in utter shock as Perfimia cheerfully offered to cook for him every single day. Realizing her absolute commitment, he quietly agreed that staying at the same inn for a while longer wouldn't be such a bad idea. Sitting down to eat her own share, Sharon casually asked Capua if he had any plans while announcing their upcoming trip to the weapons shop. Seeing a perfect opportunity to study the value of human currency, he eagerly agreed to join them before they all headed out to the guild. Arriving at the bustling army, they marveled at the massive, impressive selection of weaponry proudly on display. A cheerful, welcoming greeting echoed loudly through the spacious shop as they stepped inside. Taking the lead, Sharon politely introduced herself before Perfimia proudly declared her bronze-grade adventurer status. The enthusiastic clerk immediately ushered the girls away, leaving Capua behind as he opted to casually browse the store alone. Waving him off, Perfimia excitedly promised her master that she would absolutely return with a massive power-up. Meanwhile, a sharp-eyed shop clerk secretly locked her predatory gaze onto the unsuspecting Capua. Smirking with absolute confidence, Flea McKetton silently crowned herself the undisputed sales ace of the entire establishment. Relying on the flawless pitches she mastered at a high-end clothing boutique, she knew no customer could ever resist her charm. Her ultimate strategy was incredibly simple and ruthless, relentlessly upselling every single patron for all they were worth. Despite his shoddy, pauper-like appearance, her razor-sharp instincts designated Capua as her next prime target. Narrowing her eyes, she firmly labeled the oblivious demon as an incredibly lucrative mark. Deducing that his cheap clothes meant he was hoarding massive savings, she immediately plotted to pitch him the ridiculously expensive magic armor. Slipping into her sweetest customer service persona, she cheerfully approached him with grand dreams of endless upselling. Startled by her sudden appearance, Capua nervously tried to explain that he was merely accompanying his friends. Ignoring his protests entirely, Fleema unleashed an overwhelming, forceful barrage of creepy customer service laughter. Terrified by the bizarre social norms of humanity, Capua nervously surrendered and agreed to browse just to avoid her cursed smile. Flashing a triumphant smirk, Fleema silently celebrated hooking her latest unsuspecting victim. Without giving him a single second to breathe, she aggressively demanded to know if he wanted weapons or armor. Feeling completely cornered, Capua awkwardly muttered that he might be interested in weapons, though he truly wanted nothing at all. He desperately wanted to avoid trying on armor, absolutely dreading the idea of exposing his true demonic body to anyone else. Since his demonic body was literally a reanimated corpse sustained by magic, he knew a random human might quickly notice something horribly wrong. Completely ignoring his clear preference for weapons, the relentless Clark aggressively shoved a piece of magic armor directly into his face. Flaunting the shining breastplate, she proudly boasted that the high-quality gear was forged entirely from rare mithril. Striking a dramatic pose, she hyped up its supposed power by claiming it boosted physical defense by an incredible 40 points. Staring blankly at the pathetic number, Capua internally scoffed at how incredibly weak that stat actually was. He silently judged her obvious sales pitch, already knowing the material was mithril just from a single, unimpressed glance. Disappointed by human standards, he casually muttered that a mere 40 points was on the extreme low end, leaving the clerk completely bewildered. Recovering her composure, she praised his sharp eye and began boasting about the armor's hidden magical defense properties. Annoyed by her condescending tone, he easily guessed it had magic defense just from its painfully obvious name, completely shocking her. Beating her to the punch once again, he accurately guessed the magical defense was 300 before she could even finish her sentence. Stuttering in absolute shock, she sheepishly admitted the actual stat was only a pathetic 30. Panicking completely, she hysterically lied through her teeth, desperately claiming it was exactly 300 to save face. Staring down at the pitiful gear, Capua grimly remembered that even his lowest-ranking subordinates wore armor with stats well over 400. Noticing her intensely pale, sweating face, Capua casually asked what was wrong while she frantically denied having a total mental breakdown. Feeling incredibly pressured, Capua wondered why the overly persistent clerk was pushing him so hard to try on the armor. A sudden, terrifying realization forcefully struck his mind as he stared at her. Lunging forward with wild enthusiasm, she eagerly hyped up the armor's glossy finish to her startled customer. Trembling slightly, Capua pointed an accusatory finger directly at the aggressive saleswoman. He nervously stammered, demanding to know if she had already figured out exactly what he truly was. Completely confused by his panic, Fleema tilted her head and asked what on earth he was talking about. Misinterpreting his fear as a massive compliment, she boastfully asked if he had guessed she was the store's ace while he angrily yelled at her to stop playing dumb. Capua internally concluded that her terrifying ulterior motive was to forcefully expose his skeletal, demonic body all along. He stubbornly refused to remove his robe while the sneaky clerk aggressively tried to strip him down. Praising her incredible ability to see through him, he swore to keep his robe on while she screamed that he clearly did not trust the store's ace. The furious store manager suddenly stormed into the room, loudly demanding an explanation for the chaotic noise and horrible attitude. Fleema whined to the manager that the customer was being difficult, while Capua desperately pleaded for the boss to stop her from removing his robe. Scoffing at the accusation, Fleema haughtily claimed that a supreme ace like herself would never resort to forcefully troubling a customer. The manager simply stared at her in deafening, judging silence. Sweating nervously under his glare, she stammered his name as he respectfully bowed to apologize to his distressed customer. Without a single ounce of hesitation, the manager bluntly fired Fleema right on the spot. Shocked beyond belief, she desperately warned him that the small store would immediately go out of business without its star ace. Staring her down coldly, the manager brutally shattered her ego by revealing she was actually never the store's ace. Utterly baffled, she reminded him that he had called her the ace before, completely failing to grasp the reality of her situation. He harshly explained that she had acted cocky since her very first day without ever properly selling a single item. Revealing he only tolerated her out of obligation to a mutual friend, he officially finalized her termination effective immediately after her final pay. Bowing deeply in complete submission, the manager offered his absolute sincerest apologies and promised Capua a compensatory gift for the horrific misunderstanding. Outside on the street, Fleema bawled her eyes out over losing her job while Capua awkwardly tried to comfort her by admitting he was also recently fired. Completely ignoring the depressing drama, Perfimia happily showed off her new gear while Capua stared in confusion at the strange bell attached to it. Fully equipped and bursting with energy, Perfimia excitedly announced that they were finally ready to go on a grand quest. Taking the lead, Sharon explained that guild quests were generally divided into 3 distinct categories. She detailed the first category as subjugation quests, which primarily focused on the violent extermination of dangerous monsters. Moving down the list, she described collection quests as tasks involving the harvesting of magical plants or the recovery of ancient dungeon relics. Finally, she noted that the easiest category consisted of simple help quests meant specifically for complete newbies. Fired up with absolute determination, Perfimia loudly vowed to take on subjugation quests to grow stronger, prompting Sharon to hand over the iron-ranked options. Thanking Sharon enthusiastically, Perfimia immediately presented the quest board directly to her mentor. Capua stared blankly at the board, completely paralyzed by the realization that he was entirely illiterate in the human language. Desperately covering up his inability to read, he loudly declared he was totally exhausted from hunting monsters and casually opted for a simple collection quest instead. Slipping flawlessly into mentor mode, he wisely claimed that hunting in the exact same vicinity would severely stunt his precious disciple's growth. Perfimia completely fell for his incredibly smooth excuse, staring at him with starry-eyed admiration. Internally panicking, Capua acknowledged that his former demon allies could see through the eyes of tamed monsters, making subjugation quests a massive, deadly risk. Totally oblivious to his real motives, Sharon cheerfully approved of his decision and officially handed him the magic grass collection quest. Before he could depart, Sharon stopped him to share one final, crucial detail regarding any monsters he might accidentally encounter during his gathering task. She smoothly explained that the guild would gladly buy any monster corpses he brought back at the standard market rate, even without an official bounty. Hearing this highly suspicious and convenient caveat, Capua instantly recognized a massive, terrifying red flag waving directly in his face. Scanning the desolate area, the adventurers struggled to find their target while wondering if it was even around here. Spotting a menacing Garv wolf, one of them nervously questioned exactly how strong the beast truly was. Stepping forward with a confident smirk, Perfimia boldly promised to protect Sharon from the impending danger. Feeling emboldened by Sharon's powerful defensive magic walls, Perfimia excitedly declared they had the strength of 100 men. A terrifying voice suddenly boomed across the landscape, enthusiastically welcoming them to the literal power spot of death. Bracing for a heavy impact, the girls grunted as they faced a sudden, overwhelming assault from their unseen foe. Easily dodging a massive sword swing, the attacker mocked the sheer heaviness of their desperate, uncoordinated strikes. The villain viciously taunted their slow, inexperienced movements while laughing maniacally at their pathetic struggles. Breathing heavily, Perfimia swung her blade with all her might in a desperate, last-ditch counterattack. The powerful strike cleaved through the air with intense force, completely shattering the enemy's defenses in a dazzling display of sparks. Panicking wildly, the girls began flailing their swords around in terror while their exasperated companion flatly told them to calm down. Kicking up a massive cloud of dust, a mysterious figure skidded to a sudden, dramatic halt across the chaotic battlefield. Utterly exhausted by their unrelenting nonsense, the exasperated man simply turned his back and declared he was leaving. Ignoring their desperate pleas to wait up, he bluntly refused to stop or repeat himself as he furiously marched away. Sighing heavily, he muttered to himself about how unbelievably tiring those flailing girls truly were. Suddenly, the distinct sound of heavy footsteps shattered the quiet peace of his solo trek through the wilderness. Glancing toward the noise, a monstrous beast narrowed its eyes while trying to place the familiar face of the passing adventurer. Oblivious to the looming danger, Capua happily discovered his target Ruruaru grass just as the monster recognized him in sheer disbelief. Enjoying the peaceful silence away from his chaotic disciples, he gathered grass and emergency fruit while praising his own brilliant decision to take a simple collection quest. The towering monster violently interrupted his peaceful harvest with a low, menacing growl. Sneering wickedly, the beast gloated about finding the weakest of the heavenly monarchs, causing Capua to internally groan that his true identity was compromised. The beast proudly introduced itself as Wolftaro, a bizarrely named servant of Brazel, leaving Capua utterly bewildered by its ridiculous declaration. Condemning Capua's presence in human lands as an outright betrayal, Wolftaro violently lunged forward with dark promises of biting off his head. Without a second thought, Capua effortlessly snapped the beast's neck in an instant, sighing in absolute annoyance at these constant interruptions. Realizing the physical struggle might drop the quality of his precious magic grass, he decided to head back while expressing immense relief that the spy was permanently silenced. Glancing down at the massive corpse, he slyly recalled the guild's incredibly convenient promise to buy monster parts at market rate. Dragging the dead beast along to cover his travel expenses, he grimly noted that he would eventually come to deeply regret this fateful choice. The cheerful guild receptionist gladly hands over a hefty reward of 7,000 perukas. Recalling his miserable starting salary of a single dried frog in the demon army, Capua happily calculates that this reward covers 7 nights at the inn. Glancing around the empty hall, he turns to the receptionist and casually asks where Perfimia and Sharon went. The heavy wooden doors of the guild suddenly swing wide open. An exhausted Perfimia weakly announces her return, prompting Capua to immediately check on his battered disciple. Observing their bruised and defeated state, Capua accurately guesses that the monsters completely outran them. Meanwhile, the other adventurers gather around Capua's prey, excitedly recognizing the ferocious Gabarufu wolf by a distinct scar above its eye. Hearing the commotion, an absolutely stunned Perfimia stares at the massive beast her master somehow took down alone. Shrugging off the incredible achievement, Capua casually explains that the wolf simply attacked him while he was gathering magic grass. The surrounding guild members stare in absolute silence at the impossibly pristine corpse. Trembling with shock, a guild inspector closely examines the beast while Capua nervously wonders what exactly is wrong. Sensing a weirdly intense atmosphere, Capua internally panics and wonders if he was supposed to capture the monster alive. Before Capua can stammer out an apology, the ecstatic inspector loudly proclaims that the sight is absolutely amazing. Marveling at the total lack of blood or external cuts, the inspector enthusiastically asks Capua if he used an instant death poison. Trembling with scientific excitement, the inspector declares that museums will fight over this perfect specimen, estimating its value at well over 1 million perucas. Capua recoils in absolute shock at the staggering, life-changing valuation. Perfimia gleefully cheers that her master has instantly become incredibly rich while Capua quietly stammers in disbelief. Panic immediately overrides his greed as Capua realizes that becoming a flashy millionaire will inevitably expose his true demonic identity. Thinking quickly, Capua firmly declares he will donate the Gabarufu completely for free, prompting the stunned inspector to immediately contact the curators. Slipping back into his wise mentor persona, Capua gently chides a confused Perfimia for being too inexperienced to understand his true motives. He smoothly argues that advancing scientific development through the pristine corpse is vastly more beneficial than hoarding a temporary monetary reward. The entire guild watches him in absolute awe, completely captivated by his selfless speech. Moved to tears by his supposedly pure heart, the inspector vows to never forget this altruistic gesture while Perfimia praises his amazing character. Sweating nervously but relieved the crisis is averted, Capua awkwardly laughs and leaves the remaining paperwork to the ecstatic guild staff. Time passes as the bright sun shines over the bustling human city. A massive crowd gathers for a grand ribbon-cutting ceremony, enthusiastically celebrating the official establishment of the Capua Museum. Surrounded by adoring fans offering him delicious meat, Capua internally cringes at being repeatedly called Capua Dia. Dreading the escalating fame, he realizes that the title dangerously mimics his real name, Capsodia, making him stand out entirely too much. Escaping the oppressive crowds, he sighs in deep relief that his disciples are far away on a distant mission. Trudging along exhaustedly, Capua groans about his severe lack of recovery time before suddenly pausing. He turns his head sharply, catching a glimpse of a familiar figure approaching. His eyes widen in utter shock as he takes in the terrible sight before him. A heavily battered Perfimia tearfully apologizes to her master, prompting Capua to immediately demand who did this to them. Trembling with residual fear, Perfimia reveals that a terrifying monster relentlessly attacked them. A nearby guild official gravely explains that the nearby forest has recently been completely overrun by incredibly evil monsters. The official notes that while Perfimia tried her best, the average adventurer simply stands no chance against these new threats. Surprised by their defeat since his disciple had gained significant combat experience, Capua asks if the monstrous attackers had any distinct characteristics. Recalling the absolute nightmare, Perfimia describes a horrifying beast with sharp fangs, glowing red eyes, and 3 distinct heads. Capua's eyes light up with sudden, eager recognition at the mention of the 3 heads. Smiling fondly as he pictures his loyal demon dog Cerberus, Capua joyfully assumes his beloved pet missed him so much that it followed him all the way to human territory. As the desperate guild members panic over the total lack of high-level adventurers, Capua boldly steps forward to volunteer for the dangerous mission. Shocked by his sudden declaration, a worried Perfimia begs to join the fight while a guild official points out that Capua previously expressed a strong desire to avoid combat. Capua firmly orders a protesting Perfimia to rest and heal her severe wounds, completely shutting down her eager request to witness her master's true power. Acknowledging the extreme strength of the beast that injured his disciple, Capua internally prepares to go all out while secretly plotting to hide his deep relationship with Cerberus. Desperate to accompany her mentor, Perfimia continues to plead her case while Capua silently commands her to be honest about her limits. A nearby old man steps in to thank Capua, intentionally twisting his words to convince Perfimia that her presence would only hinder her master's maximum output. Completely swayed by the old man's logic, Perfimia finally yields and enthusiastically begs her master to win the upcoming battle. Clasping her hands together in earnest prayer, Sharon softly begs Capua to return victorious from the dangerous hunt. Confidently turning away, Capua vows to definitely return alive since the literal goddess of victory is praying for his success. The entire guild gathers to cheer him on, shouting endless words of encouragement as he waves a casual goodbye. Left alone with his thoughts, Capua quietly commands his beloved pet Cerberus to wait for his imminent arrival. Meanwhile, far away in the dark demonic realm, a tense silence blankets the foreboding corridors. Striding out of a grand chamber, Ruviana flatly announces her immediate departure to a waiting Brazel. Brazel blocks her path, prompting a mildly annoyed Ruviana to demand what he wants from her. Before she can walk away, Brazel urgently calls her name to halt her progress through the corridor. Flashing a smooth smirk, Brazel asks if she is free tonight and casually invites her to a local bar that serves premium dragon's head steak. Ruviana completely shuts him down, offering a cold and immediate apology before claiming she already has plans. Annoyed by the sudden rejection, Brazel angrily notes that she used the exact same excuse last time and accuses her of simply avoiding him. Ignoring his rising temper, Ruviana reveals she is leaving to tend to her sick pet whose failing health has deeply concerned her. Shifting the conversation, a smug Brazel suddenly asks Ruviana if she remembers the intricate details of his secretive research. Ruviana looks back with mild interest, instantly recalling his highly questionable research regarding deadly chimera toys. Confirming her memory, Brazel proudly explains that he is analyzing cells to engineer far more ferocious and destructive monsters. He wickedly reveals that he has already unleashed one of his experimental creations into the wild as a live test. Boasting of his grand ambitions, Brazel claims that collecting data from this field test will soon grant him an unstoppable level of power. Stepping dangerously close, Brazel desperately begs Ruviana to choose him over the long-banished Capsodia. When Ruviana defends Capsodia's incredible power, Brazel scoffs that their former comrade is completely powerless after his banishment. The atmosphere grows incredibly tense as Ruviana glares at him with cold, unspoken fury. Caught off guard by her sudden, terrifying intensity, Brazel nervously recoils from her sharp gaze. Quickly losing his composure, a sweating Brazel stammers out a hasty apology and insists he meant no disrespect. Turning her back on his pathetic stuttering, Ruviana quietly exits the corridor without saying another word. Huffing in absolute annoyance, Brazel crosses his arms and tries to brush off the humiliating rejection. Glaring into the darkness, he wickedly vows that absolutely everything will eventually fall into his rightful possession. Meanwhile, a cheerful Capua approaches the forest with a basket of fresh fruit, eagerly anticipating a sweet reunion with his beloved Cerberus. A terrified human scream suddenly shatters the peace, completely disrupting his happy thoughts. Rushing toward the noise, Capua's eyes shoot wide open in absolute horror as a massive, monstrous shadow looms ahead. A colossal, multi-headed beast roars viciously, completely pinning a helpless human adventurer beneath its heavy claws. The savage creature glares down at its prey, baring its razor-sharp fangs with absolute malice. Witnessing the horrific scene, a nearby observer panics upon realizing a mere iron-level adventurer is facing the beast. Desperate to prevent a slaughter, they scream for the iron-level warrior to run away from an opponent they cannot possibly handle. Enraged by the brutal violence unfolding right in front of him, Capua screams a furious curse at the monstrous attacker. Furious, Capua declares only his beloved Cerberus deserves to be a three-headed beast in this world. He boldly proclaims that absolutely nothing surpasses his cute pet simply because he decided so. Insulted by the blatant disrespect, the massive beast glares down with dark, rumbling fury. Roaring with earth-shattering rage, the monster demands how a mere human dares mock its majesty. Unfazed by the terrifying display, Capua coldly announces it is time for the beast to die. Caught off guard, the monstrous creature wails in absolute agony as the overwhelming attack instantly destroys it. Watching from the shadows, a hidden observer stammers in sheer terror upon realizing the Hydra Lord has fallen. Completely ignoring the chaos, the disappointed victor silently turns his back and walks away. Trudging away, Capua bitterly laments that the ferocious beast was not his beloved pet after all. Sighing heavily, his heart aches over the tragic reality that his cute Cerberus remains missing. Meanwhile, the heavy clinking of tight metallic chains echoes ominously through a cold, dark room. Panting under the oppressive weight, a massive demonic beast struggles helplessly against its binding restraints. Trembling in misery, the trapped Cerberus silently wonders how its glorious life spiraled into such a nightmare. The beast grumpily recalls how its previous master constantly bombarded it with annoying complaints and overtime. Comparing that past, Cerberus fondly admits its new mistress is sweet and always forgiving. However, its wholesome thoughts shatter as its mistress cheerily announces mealtime, making the beast question its fate. Staring wide-eyed, the terrified demon dog shrinks back and lets out a pitiful whimper. Peeking from the shadows, an enthusiastic Ruviana joyfully shouts that she finally found her hiding pet. Forcing a happy bark, Cerberus accepts her aggressive petting while she fusses over its dusty fur. Affectionately noting the beast must be starving, Ruviana proudly reveals she brought special food. Presenting a violently bubbling concoction, she cheerfully offers the vile meal while Cerberus stares in sheer revulsion. Completely oblivious to its horror, she tries to spoon-feed the toxic slop while scolding Cerberus for losing weight. As Capua returns from the forest, a desperate voice suddenly calls out his name from across the room. Lunging forward with overwhelming relief, Perfimia tackles him into a tight, breathless hug. Struggling against her powerful grip, he awkwardly reminds her not to cling to him in public while wincing from the sharp pain. His mind briefly flashes back to the depressing reality that his solo mission completely failed to locate his beloved dog. Stepping forward with a gentle smile, Sharon warmly welcomes the exhausted adventurer back home. Capua pauses, genuinely touched by their sincere relief at his safe return. Sharon's eyes soften with deep gratitude as she looks upon her returning friend. Apologizing for causing them unnecessary worry, he listens as Sharon confidently states she always believed in his victory before asking if the monster is dead. Sweating slightly under their intense, expectant gazes, Capua awkwardly confirms that he sort of took care of the beast. The entire guild immediately erupts into wild cheers, praising him to the heavens for single-handedly slaughtering the legendary Hydrolord. Capua recoils in absolute shock, furiously demanding to know why they completely failed to mention the target's terrifying identity beforehand. Staring at him with starry-eyed admiration, Perfimia proudly declares that her master is absolutely amazing. Clenching her fists with renewed determination, she vows to become a powerful hero capable of bringing happiness to everyone she meets. Capua gazes down at his eager disciple, quietly moved by her unwavering and innocent resolve. Observing the heartfelt moment, Sharon gently notes that Perfimia has been heavily burdened by a harsh losing streak recently. Offering a warm smile of encouragement, Sharon assures Perfimia that she will undoubtedly achieve her grand dreams. The celebration abruptly halts as a stern guild official steps in, demanding physical proof that Capua actually completed the subjugation. Panic strikes Capua's heart as he realizes he was far too angry about his missing dog to remember carving out a monster trophy. Desperately trying to avoid another unwanted museum being built in his honor, Capua frantically prepares a lie just as a mysterious voice interrupts him. A dramatic silence falls over the bustling guild hall as a heavily armored figure suddenly steps into the light. Tossing a massive, bloody chunk of the Hydrolord directly onto the counter, the stranger leaves the entire room completely speechless. Gasps echo through the stunned crowd as an adventurer instantly recognizes the imposing newcomer as Misteltum, the legendary Absolute Flash. Whispers of Absolute Awe spread like wildfire, confirming the man is a silver-ranked warrior and one of the royal capital's top 10 fighters. Staring at the famous hero, Capua internally connects the dots and realizes this was the hidden observer lurking in the dark forest. The official immediately turns to Capua, suspiciously asking if his victory claim was a total lie and if Misteltum actually dealt the final blow. Internally screaming with absolute joy, Capua realizes this perfect misunderstanding will finally allow him to live in quiet peace. Staring intensely at the silver-ranked hero, Capua mentally begs the man to steal the achievement and take all the unwanted glory. Sweating profusely, Capua practically prays for Misteltum to claim the kill, silently promising to do anything in return for his silence. Shattering Capua's desperate hopes in an instant, Misteltum firmly points directly at the demon and declares that Capua was the true victor. The crowd erupts into even louder cheers while the guild official playfully scolds Misteltum for returning home without his massive prey. Misunderstanding the situation entirely, Misteltum tearfully assumes Capua intentionally abandoned the valuable corpse so the injured knight could claim the massive bounty. Seizing the convenient excuse, Capua smoothly lies that he left the money behind specifically to help heal Misteltum's severe battle wounds. Overwhelmed by the sheer, unbridled generosity, the hardened silver-ranked warrior bursts into ugly, passionate tears. Lunging forward with extreme emotion, Misteltum aggressively grabs Capua's hands in a painfully tight, unwavering grip. Dropping heavily to his knees, the legendary hero bows his head in absolute, unwavering reverence toward his savior. Weeping openly, Misteltum reveals that he spent 15 agonizing years seeking revenge after that exact monster burned down his hometown. Though deeply frustrated he couldn't secure the kill himself, the knight solemnly swears that he and his partner will never forget Capua's incredible kindness. Wincing intensely from the bone-crushing grip on his hands, Capua awkwardly accepts the dramatic, tearful display of gratitude. The surrounding adventurers loudly declare Capua a true saint while Perfimia beams with absolute pride for her incredibly selfless master. As the entire guild passionately begs him to lead them, Capua internally cringes at the terrifying new, unwanted title of saint. The very next day dawns brightly, signaling a fresh start after the chaotic events of the previous battle. A peaceful atmosphere settles over the city as the morning light washes through the quiet streets. The quiet stillness is quickly broken as the group gathers together indoors. Healing magic glows softly as Misteltum thanks the Saint of Prophecy, confirming her treatment is more than enough. Deeply impressed by her legendary power, the injured knight vows to fully repay his massive debt to her one day. Flustered by his intense gratitude, Sharon bashfully stammers that she is simply doing her job. Shifting his heavy gaze, Misteltum abruptly changes the subject to address the elephant in the room. Stepping forward, the knight officially greets Perfimia and directly acknowledges her as the hero chosen by Sharon. His tone immediately sharpens as he brutally recounts her constant failures, specifically highlighting her defeat during the Vizag incident. Looming over the young adventurer, he sternly questions if she truly understands the absolute weight of being Sharon's chosen champion. Watching the intense scolding from the sidelines, Capua silently notes how unbelievably straightforward the seasoned warrior is. Capua internally admits the harsh truth that Perfimia's quest success rate sits at a dismal 20% despite her absolute best efforts. Jumping to her defense, Sharon explains that Perfimia is desperately trying to gain experience because she simply lacks proper combat training. Refusing to back down, Misteltum demands to know who exactly forced her into becoming an adventurer and how long she has actually been fighting. Before Capua can intervene, Perfimia steps forward and forcefully cuts Sharon off. Clenching her fists, Perfimia humbly confesses that she was entirely unprepared and relied entirely too much on her companions. Staring directly into the imposing knight's eyes, her expression hardens with fierce, unshakable resolve. Bowing deeply in total submission, she passionately begs Misteltum to personally train her. Misteltum warns her that gaining strength is incredibly difficult, but she firmly insists on severing all ties with her past naivety. Standing tall, Perfimia proudly declares she must endure this simply because she is a true hero. A tense silence blankets the room as Misteltum closely evaluates her burning determination. Conceding to her fiery spirit, he agrees to take her on as a student since he plans to stay in the city until he and his partner fully recover. Erupting with joyous gratitude, Perfimia profusely thanks him while he casually redirects her appreciation toward the saintess. Crossing his arms, Misteltum issues a stern warning that he absolutely will not allow her to cut any corners. Catching herself mid-sentence, Perfimia immediately tightens her posture and offers a firm, disciplined agreement. Flashing a bright, eager smile, she excitedly looks forward to the grueling work ahead. The intense confrontation finally concludes, leaving a heavy sense of anticipation lingering in the air. Standing awkwardly in the background, Capua internally sweat drops as he realizes he has not spoken a single word all day. Time violently skips forward, throwing the characters straight into the harsh reality of their new brutal routine. The sharp clash of weapons rings out as the intense sparring sessions push the young hero to her physical limits. Misteltum ruthlessly screams at his student, demanding more power while loudly declaring that she is far too slow. 5 grueling days pass, leaving Misteltum completely baffled when an utterly exhausted Perfimia accidentally throws her own sword away. Annoyed by the disruption, Capua complains that Perfimia trains until she collapses, completely abandoning them just to forcefully crash in his bed. A sudden, quiet knocking sound echoes softly through the room, shattering the late-night silence. The heavy wooden door slowly creaks open, revealing a hesitant visitor standing alone in the dark hallway. Stepping into the dim light, Sharon looks completely lost in her own somber thoughts. Spotting her solemn expression, Capua quietly calls out Sharon's name to grab her attention. When he asks if she is worried about her friend, Sharon hesitates before admitting her deep, lingering concerns. Offering a soft, melancholic smile, she politely welcomes Capua back home and thanks him for his kindness. Looking down with profound guilt, Sharon quietly wonders aloud if she has actually been holding Perfimia back this entire time. Looking down in regret, Sharon admits that she only wanted to give Perfimia a little more confidence. Observing her distress, Capua internally notes that the Saintess is definitely worrying far too much about her absent friend. Breaking the silence, Capua casually suggests that Sharon should just go check on Perfimia if she is truly that concerned. Sharon hesitates because 6 whole days have already passed, but Capua reassures her that Perfimia definitely wants to see her too. Internally, Capua realizes with growing dread that his own peace will be completely ruined if Sharon refuses to go. Driven entirely by his selfish desire to protect his precious leisure time, Capua decides to forcefully intervene. Grabbing Sharon's shoulder with dramatic flair, he loudly declares that he absolutely cannot just stand by and do nothing. Arriving at the training grounds, Capua casually calls out to his disciple, completely shocking the exhausted Perfimia. Bursting into immediate tears, Perfimia wildly lunges at her master while wailing about the grueling horrors of her intense training. Gently patting her head, Capua warmly praises her incredible hard work while she continues to sob into his chest. Noticing her friend standing nearby, Perfimia tearfully thanks Sharon for taking the time to visit her as well. From around the corner, an unknown girl shyly peeks out and stares intensely at the bewildered Saintess. Catching sight of the timid stranger, Capua correctly deduces that she must be Misteltum's previously injured adventuring partner. Bounding forward with sudden energy, the girl introduces herself as Verdana and enthusiastically thanks Sharon for healing her severe injuries. Smiling warmly, Sharon tells Verdana not to mention it and expresses immense relief at seeing the young girl fully recovered. A slightly awkward silence settles over the group as Verdana continues to stare unblinkingly into Sharon's eyes. Abruptly pivoting, Verdana thanks Capua for his heroic rescue before randomly asking a bewildered Sharon if she enjoys freshly baked bread. Misteltum suddenly marches onto the scene, harshly demanding to know why these outsiders are actively interrupting his rigorous training session. Scoffing at the knight's hostility, Capua coldly asks if it is truly considered a crime to check on his own disciple's development. Rising to the challenge, Misteltum proposes a live sparring match to physically demonstrate exactly how much Perfimia has grown. Startled by the sudden escalation, Perfimia hesitates for a brief second before nervously accepting the intimidating duel. Gripping her wooden sword tightly, Perfimia lunges forward with explosive speed to launch a fierce opening strike. The heavy wooden blades crash together violently as Misteltum effortlessly blocks her powerful overhead swing. Realizing the direct assault failed, Perfimia leaps backward to rapidly create a safe distance between herself and the towering knight. Kicking off the dirt with intense force, she aggressively dashes right back into the danger zone for another lightning-fast combo. Watching the relentless assault from the sidelines, Capua notes that her overall speed has increased dramatically in just 3 days. Misteltum silently acknowledges her impressive quickness as she unleashes a blistering flurry of rapid strikes. Despite praising her speed, the seasoned knight effortlessly parries every single blow while grimly questioning how long she can actually maintain this momentum. Spinning sharply, Perfimia aims a devastating, sweeping horizontal slash directly at Misteltum's unprotected flank. The desperate attack misses empty air as Misteltum gracefully dodges, leaving an exhausted Perfimia visibly frustrated. Cheering wildly from the sidelines, Sharon urges her friend to keep pushing hard since the target is standing right in front of her. Capua suddenly narrows his eyes, noticing a terrifying and deeply unsettling detail about the knight's flawless defensive stance. A wave of dread washes over Capua as he realizes Misteltum has not moved a single step from his original starting position. Halting the spar, Misteltum bluntly critiques Perfimia, stating that while her abilities and spirit are top tier, she possesses absolutely zero natural battle intuition. Delivering a crushing verbal blow, Misteltum coldly declares that she is fundamentally not cut out for the harsh reality of fighting. Stepping up to defend his devastated disciple, Capua argues that with enough time and patience, Perfimia will inevitably become a great hero. Misteltum sternly counters that time is an impossible luxury, coldly reminding them that demons are actively slaughtering innocent humans at this very moment. The overwhelming weight of her instructor's brutal reality completely shatters Perfimia's spirit, sending her crashing hopelessly to her knees. Staring down at the broken girl, Misteltum coldly demands to know what is wrong while reminding her that their fight is not officially over yet. Tears streaming uncontrollably down her face, Perfimia screams in total despair that despite all her quests, grueling training, and painful sacrifices, she remains completely powerless. Realizing the crushing weight of her own limitations, Perfimia tearfully admits that she is still incredibly weak. The heavy silence of the training grounds amplifies her overwhelming despair as tears continue to stream down her face. Shocking everyone present, she chokes back a bitter sob and begins to utter a devastating decision about giving up. Trembling under the intense gaze of her master and friends, she hesitates for an agonizing second before speaking her final truth. Screaming through her tears, Perfimia absolutely shatters the quiet atmosphere by declaring that she is officially giving up on being a hero. The scene opens in absolute silence as the heavy emotional weight of the previous confrontation lingers in the air. A somber atmosphere settles over the training grounds while the characters process the heartbreaking declaration. Tears stream down her face as Perfimia officially declares that she is quitting her path as a hero. Suddenly, Capua lunges forward with a focused gaze and begins to call out the first syllable of her name. He aggressively closes the distance while continuing to shout the second part of her name. Stretching her cheeks violently, he finishes shouting her name to snap her out of her deep despair. As she cries out in pain and begs him to stop, Capua laughs and claims he is merely returning the favor for all the times she pulled the exact same stunt on him. Releasing his grip, he shifts to a serious tone and asks her to identify her absolute biggest strength. She tentatively guesses that it might be her physical ability, but Capua immediately shuts her down with a firm rejection. Rubbing her sore cheeks, an annoyed Perfimia admits that she has absolutely no idea what he is trying to get at. Demanding her full attention, Capua confidently prepares to reveal the true source of her hidden power. Pointing directly at her, he loudly declares that her greatest strength is her unbreakable spirit. Utterly bewildered by the strange answer, Perfimia stares back at him with wide, confused eyes. Capua internally notes that while the upper echelon of the demon race is filled with incredibly strong fighters, none of them possess a spirit quite like hers. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he passionately proclaims that she is unequivocally the most spirited individual in the entire world. The bold statement finally resonates within her mind as she slowly repeats the empowering title to herself. Encouraging her to fake confidence until she makes it, Capua instructs her to hold her head high, breathe deeply, and march forward at her own unique pace. A renewed fire sparks in Perfimia's eyes as she completely absorbs her master's profound encouragement. Pivoting immediately, Capua challenges Misteltum to another sparring session, which the knight accepts while arrogantly warning that the result will be identical. Misteltum readies his weapon and calls out to the young warrior to begin the rematch. Capua simply advises Perfimia to do what she does best, leaving her slightly hesitant but willing to trust his guidance. When an amazed Sharon asks what exactly he did to restore her resolve, Capua casually brushes it off as a little piece of simple advice. Settling into a firm defensive stance, Misteltum coldly dares Perfimia to come at him with everything she has. Gripping her training weapon with absolute conviction, Perfimia fiercely accepts the challenge. Kicking off the ground with explosive force, she launches herself forward in a blinding blur of speed. Observers gasp in sheer shock as she charges straight ahead in a reckless direct assault, predicting that Misteltum will effortlessly crush her again. Assuming Capua is exploiting the natural sturdiness of the Crimson Wolf tribe, Sharon guesses he intends for Perfimia to fight as a relentless shield knight. Capua praises her logical deduction but smugly corrects her, stating the true reason is simply that Perfimia is Sharon's uniquely chosen hero. A deafening crash echoes across the yard as Perfimia collides violently against Misteltum's heavy guard. Screaming with absolute support, Sharon desperately cheers for her best friend to push past her absolute limits. Refusing to step back, Perfimia repeatedly chants her vow to move forward while the seasoned knight struggles to maintain his footing. Misteltum's eyes widen in absolute disbelief as her overwhelming forward momentum violently shatters his perfect stance. Dropping her weapon entirely, Perfimia forcefully grabs the massive knight in an unbreakable grip. Shifting her entire body weight, she executes a flawless and devastating throw against her much larger opponent. Launched completely off his feet, a bewildered Misteltum flies helplessly through the air. The heavy knight crashes brutally into the solid dirt, kicking up a massive cloud of dust upon impact. The dust slowly clears to reveal the defeated warrior lying flat on his back as the match is officially called in Perfimia's favor. Instead of throwing a fit, Misteltum bursts into hearty laughter as he proudly acknowledges the young girl's incredible triumph. Still processing the unbelievable victory, Perfimia asks if she actually won while Sharon enthusiastically showers her in warm congratulations. Throwing her arms into the air, a beaming Perfimia shouts in pure joy as she finally secures her long-awaited success. The training grounds erupt in joyful cheers as Perfimia wildly celebrates her unbelievable victory. Observing the celebration, Capua internally notes that a hero's true strength lies in their terrifying ability to revive from hopeless situations through simple encouragement. He softly acknowledges that the current Perfimia is already doing a fantastic job embodying the true spirit of a hero. Despite knowing that sowing discord between the girls would vastly benefit the demon race, Capua quietly watches their wholesome reunion. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, Perfimia gently reaches out to her worried friend. Tears welling in her eyes, Perfimia sincerely apologizes to Sharon and admits she was simply overwhelmed by loneliness. She emotionally confesses that her absolute best efforts were only possible because Sharon was there to support her. Vowing to definitely protect her forever, Perfimia desperately asks if she can remain by the Saintess's side from now on. Touched deeply by the earnest plea, a warm and gentle smile slowly spreads across Sharon's face. Clasping her hands together, Sharon gladly accepts the vow and formally entrusts herself to hero Perfimia's care. Turning back with a beaming smile, Perfimia enthusiastically thanks her master for ensuring everything went exactly as he planned. Capua smugly reveals he knew wrestling was her true calling simply because she constantly and painfully clings to him. He firmly advises her to rely entirely on her unbreakable spirit to gain the courage needed to overcome any future opponent. Overjoyed by the profound advice, Perfimia launches herself directly at her master for another aggressive hug. Sighing in pure exasperation, Capua braces himself as his overly affectionate disciple violently tackles him to the ground. Bypassing the hug entirely, Perfimia forcefully grips the startled demon and executes a flawless, devastating throw. Swearing to never give her advice again, Capua groans in agony while Perfimia apologizes for her terrifying new reflex. Meanwhile, in the dark corridors of the demonic realm, a heavy sigh echoes through the tense atmosphere. Ruviana stands silently in the dimly lit hallway, quietly organizing a stack of important documents. Exhausted from her endless duties, she lets out a soft, tired breath to compose herself. A passing colleague casually mentions they are heading straight to Brizelle's room for a quick meeting. Heavy footsteps echo ominously as Ruviana approaches a grand, imposing door. Pausing right outside the entrance, she braces herself before formally requesting permission to enter. Recent dark rumors suggest that Brizelle's twisted research greatly impressed the Demon Lord, earning him his very own private office. Brizelle smoothly invites her inside, prompting Ruviana to grimly note that this promotion should have been a joyous occasion. Leaning back arrogantly, Brizelle questions her sudden visit and smugly asks if she is jealous of his private workspace. Rejecting the bait, Ruviana calmly states she is perfectly fine with her current setup for a very specific reason. Remembering their legendary past unity, she firmly believes that splitting the team apart is entirely counterproductive to their grand goals. Deep down, she cherishes the simple, unspoken truth that working together was always genuinely more fun. Shrugging off her sentiment, Brizelle demands to know her actual business while reminding her the offer still stands. Stepping forward, Ruviana professionally hands over the thick stack of requested documents for his review. Snatching the papers, Brizelle's eyes narrow as a wicked smirk slowly creeps across his face. Before she can exit the room, Brizelle suddenly calls out her name and smoothly suggests they spend the day working together. Ruviana immediately shuts the invitation down, offering a cold excuse about needing to feed her pet. Visibly irritated by the constant rejections, Brizelle aggressively demands why she cannot simply delegate the pathetic chore to a subordinate. Standing her ground, Ruviana insists her beloved dog has been losing weight and falling mysteriously ill. Enraged by her insubordination, Brizelle steps closer and dangerously asks if she dares defy the absolute strongest heavenly monarch. The violent tension is instantly shattered as a frantic subordinate suddenly bursts into the room with an urgent report. Caught completely off guard, Brizelle snaps his attention toward the terrified messenger. The heavy, suffocating silence returns as the dark consequences of the sudden interruption loom over the demonic commanders. A frantic subordinate bursts into the room, completely shattering the tense atmosphere. Desperate to halt the commander's departure, the terrified messenger loudly begs him to wait. Turning around with a sharp glare, Brizelle coldly demands to know the reason for this sudden intrusion. Unable to hide his sheer annoyance, the demonic commander clicks his tongue in deep irritation. Trembling under the intense gaze, the messenger nervously stammers that he brings a highly urgent report. Dropping an absolute bombshell, the subordinate reveals that the newly revised Hydrolord has been completely annihilated. Brizelle freezes in absolute shock, his mind struggling to process the devastating news. Snapping out of his daze, he loudly questions how his supposedly flawless creation could possibly fall. He furiously denies reality, boasting that his experimental chimera was 3 times stronger than the original and easily capable of crushing S-rank threats. Seething with dark, unbridled rage, Brazel demands to know exactly who is responsible for this impossible feat. The terrified messenger explains that hidden researchers spotted the famous adventurers Misteltum the Flash and unsinkable Veldana at the battlefield. Brazel grimly acknowledges the duo as highly renowned silver-rank adventurers who possess incredibly troublesome skills. Narrowing his eyes in the shadows, the demonic commander tries to calculate exactly how such inferior humans could pull this off. Hearing that the Hydrolord was mysteriously destroyed the second the researchers blinked, Brazel furiously screams that mere silver ranks could never achieve this. Grasping desperately for any logical explanation, he wonders if the humans utilized some highly potent poison. He violently shoots down his own theory a second later, screaming that his ultimate beast possessed absolute poison resistance. A heavy, suffocating silence descends upon the room as the undeniable weight of his catastrophic failure finally sinks in. Regaining a shred of his dark composure, Brazel coldly orders the terrified subordinate to report this disaster directly to the Demon Lord. A twisted, malicious smile slowly creeps onto Brazel's face as he steps forward to offer the messenger a special reward for his good work. A sickening splash of violence instantly concludes the meeting as the unlucky subordinate is brutally executed on the spot. A sudden realization violently strikes Brazel as he processes the disastrous situation. Realizing he cannot let the subordinate report his failure to the Demon Lord, he viciously attacks, prompting Ruviana to scream his name in absolute horror. Ruviana argues that the countryside humans defeating an S-rank monster is a massive threat that requires the Heavenly Kings to unite. Brazel furiously cuts her off, insisting the failure is his alone and declaring he will personally eliminate the problem to avoid any blame. Screaming at Ruviana to shut up, he dangerously threatens to eliminate her just like he did the unfortunate messenger. A tense silence fills the room as scattered documents flutter chaotically through the blood-stained air. Analyzing the battlefield logic, Brazel deduces that the skilled human adventurers must have sustained injuries and retreated to a nearby town to heal. Watching his descending madness, Ruviana nervously asks what exactly he intends to do with this newfound information. Brazel's eyes narrow with dark, unbridled intent as he arrogantly states that his next move should be completely obvious. With absolute malice burning in his voice, he declares his terrifying intention to personally lead the destructive flame beasts directly to the human settlement. Smirking wickedly into the shadows, he vows to show the foolish humans exactly what happens when they dare to mock his supreme power. His maniacal laughter violently echoes through the dark corridors of the demonic fortress as he finalizes his destructive plot. Meanwhile, in the bright human town, a sudden collision startles a young girl as she drops her belongings onto the cobblestone. A cloaked figure immediately kneels down, carefully picking up the dropped item and politely handing it back to the child. The girl cheerfully thanks the mysterious Mr., prompting the man to apologize for bumping into her while internally questioning her polite title. Watching the innocent child walk away safely, the disguised demon quietly muses that these humans are surprisingly hard to hate. A sudden, lively commotion down the street immediately draws his sharp attention. His eyes widen slightly from beneath his hood as he spots a highly familiar group gathered in the bustling town square. Peeking carefully from the shadows, he intensely watches their movements to absolutely confirm their true identities. The lively group continues their cheerful interaction, completely unaware of the powerful, shadowy observer lurking just steps away. Recognizing their distinct faces, the cloaked figure silently confirms to himself that he has finally found his targets. Preparing for his next calculated move, he begins to softly chant a mysterious, magical incantation under his breath. The scene opens on a quiet and unsuspecting atmosphere just moments before chaos erupts. A sudden, piercing scream violently shatters the peace as Sharon cries out in sheer terror. Rushing immediately to her side, an anxious Perfimia desperately demands to know what is wrong with her friend. Trembling uncontrollably, Sharon reveals that she just sensed an incredibly dreadful malice looming over the area. The sudden declaration sends a sharp chill through the room as the group processes the terrifying implication. A tense voice breaks the silence, asking if the Saintess just experienced another one of her prophetic premonitions. Processing the ominous warning, the adventurers cautiously wonder what dark entity could possibly produce such pure malice. A heavy, suffocating silence descends as the horrifying truth slowly dawns on everyone present. Muttering in absolute shock, they collectively realize that a demonic presence has invaded their territory. A panicked adventurer loudly argues that demons have absolutely no reason to attack such an isolated countryside. Struggling to articulate her vision, Sharon explains that her premonitions are typically fragmented and highly unclear. However, her latest vision was terrifyingly vivid, depicting the demon army completely dominating the entire land. The sheer scale of the predicted destruction leaves the entire room completely speechless. Grimly accepting the dark prophecy, an adventurer notes that her visions are almost certainly accurate this time. Suddenly, the tense atmosphere shifts as a seasoned warrior urgently calls out to Misteltum for guidance. Stepping forward, Misteltum confirms the imminent threat by revealing he just sensed a massive surge of released magic. He grimly deduces that a massive swarm of lizardans is using transfer magic to teleport directly toward the town from the west. Panic violently erupts through the guild when Misteltum estimates the approaching demonic horde consists of roughly 10,000 monsters. Desperate for a viable survival strategy, the terrified crowd immediately turns to Mackenzie for official orders. Without a second of hesitation, Mackenzie gravely declares that they must immediately abandon the town and evacuate every single citizen. While Mackenzie plans the evacuation, Perfimia stubbornly refuses to run just as Misteltum calculates the army will arrive within a day. Sharon looks at her incredibly brave friend with a complex mixture of deep awe and overwhelming concern. Misteltum harshly warns Perfimia to stop her foolishness, bluntly stating she lacks the raw power to fight 10,000 demons. Admitting her own weakness, Perfimia firmly declares it does not matter because she draws endless inspiration from her master's fearless actions. She passionately recounts how her master saved them from legendary threats without ever hesitating or researching their immense power. Determined to embody that exact heroic ideal, she vows to forge ahead regardless of the opponent's terrifying strength. Standing tall, Perfimia proudly embraces her destiny as Sharon's chosen hero and promises to single-handedly annihilate the invading demon army. Meanwhile, a completely oblivious figure casually munches on a snack in the background while the intense heroic declaration echoes through the room. Deeply moved by her incredible resolve, Sharon gazes affectionately at the fearless young hero. Sighing heavily at her reckless bravery, a veteran adventurer shakes his head in mild exasperation. Inspired by the young girl's unwavering courage, the surrounding adventurers decide they absolutely cannot back down either. Mackenzie quickly redirects Carla to warn the mayor while he prepares himself to join the desperate battle. Stepping up to the plate, Misteltum's partner declares she will fight the horde simply to protect her peaceful days of baking bread. Refusing to let a young girl fight alone, Misteltum readies his blade to uphold his proud, unyielding title as the Absolute Flash. The crowd marvels at the sudden, overwhelming surge of fighting spirit radiating from their seasoned comrades. Fired up by the infectious morale, the rest of the guild erupts into cheers as genuine hope for victory finally takes root. Overwhelmed by their incredible support, a beaming Perfimia loudly thanks everyone for standing by her side. Smiling confidently, Perfimia internally vows never to run away as long as her beloved master remains firmly by her side. Clenching her fists with absolute determination, she fully cements her unshakable vow to stand her ground. The heroic momentum suddenly stalls when a confused adventurer awkwardly points out that Capua is completely missing from the room. Standing her ground, Perfimia acknowledges they cannot always rely on her master, even if having him there would be comforting. Clenching her fists, she realizes that she will never catch up to him if she cannot survive this impending disaster. Looking up with deep determination, she softly calls out his name and asks if he agrees with her fierce resolve. Meanwhile, far from the chaotic town, Capua stands completely alone in the quiet wilderness. Sighing softly, he turns to address his three former subordinates, Rito, Reito, and Izu, casually noting that he was waiting for them. Startled by his awareness, the trio demands to know how he spotted them, revealing they discovered his location by performing an autopsy on the revised Hydrolord. Capua immediately connects the dots, realizing Brazel engineered the modified beast that he had effortlessly destroyed. Nodding in agreement, Capua acknowledges that while others were easily fooled, his former subordinates would never miss his distinct magical signature. The three demons abruptly drop their playful demeanor and grimly warn Capsodia to prepare himself for what comes next. Tension spikes wildly as the shadowy figures slowly close in on their former commander. They suddenly dive forward, aggressively closing the distance in a blinding flash of coordinated movement. Instead of attacking, they violently crash to their knees and press their heads firmly against the dirt in absolute, pathetic submission. Bawling their eyes out, the trio desperately begs their former commander to take pity and help them. Utterly bewildered by the dramatic shift, Capua stares down at his groveling subordinates in stunned silence. Regaining his composure, he nervously asks if they were actually aiming to capture him as they thrust a massive stack of papers toward his face. Groaning in pure exasperation, Capua visibly recoils at the sheer, terrifying size of the overwhelming paperwork. Staring in absolute horror at the massive demon revival list, he loudly protests that managing roughly 10,000 resurrections is completely absurd. Trying to maintain order, Rito frantically shakes the exhausted section manager Izu to snap him back to reality. Clearing their throats, the trio sheepishly admits they are begging for a massive favor while Capua braces himself for the worst. Confirming his darkest fears, they explicitly plead with Capua to personally process the colossal revival list for them. Hesitating slightly, Capua questions if helping them would infuriate Brazel and ultimately backfire on all of them. The subordinates vehemently argue that Brazel is completely in the wrong for overworking them without sleep, insisting some sacrifices must be made to prevent a full-blown war. Wailing in despair, they scream that dealing with 10,000 demons by themselves is physically impossible without a much larger workforce. Looking at the painfully thick list, Capua feels a twinge of sympathy upon realizing that Brazel has pushed the usually resilient Izu to total exhaustion. Desperately promising to keep his presence a strict secret, the demons cry out for Capsodia to save them from their endless administrative hell. Sighing heavily, Capua firmly agrees to assist on the strict condition that Brazel never finds out about his involvement. The exhausted demons look up with wide, teary eyes, stammering in disbelief that he is actually willing to save them. Shrugging off their awe, Capua grumbles that it simply cannot be helped since they are in such a miserable state. While Capua internally pities their horrific workload, Rito bitterly demands that Rito treat him to a proper meal as compensation. Slipping back into his efficient commander persona, Capua demands to know the exact deadline, only to be told he has a mere half-day to finish. Capua's brain completely short-circuits as the impossible time limit violently echoes in his frantic mind. Stuttering in absolute denial, he desperately repeats the time frame, silently praying he misheard their ridiculous demand. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Capua curses their absurdity as the demons excitedly declare they have secured a workspace and forcefully drag him away. Kicking and screaming, Capua is mercilessly hauled off into the shadows to endure hours of agonizing, mind-numbing paperwork. Meanwhile, a massive, terrifying army of demonic lizardons marches relentlessly across the rugged landscape. Thousands of heavily armored monsters move in perfect, terrifying synchronization beneath the darkening sky. The thunderous footsteps of the imposing horde echo loudly as they rapidly approach the outskirts of the unsuspecting human settlement. Marching at the vanguard, a demon comments that Brazel must be struggling severely if he is deploying them to such a remote city. Bagay sharply orders Rogun not to drop his guard, warning that the terrifying entity responsible for slaughtering the revised Hydrolord is actively waiting for them. Trying to lighten the grim mood, Rogun casually mocks Brazel's terrible naming sense, prompting Bagay to nervously silence him before they attract unwanted attention. A demon commander groans about the exhausting workload before suddenly noticing something curious in the distance. A small but fiercely determined group of human adventurers stands boldly in the direct path of the incoming demonic horde. The brave defenders ready their weapons with unwavering resolve as they stare down the overwhelming enemy numbers. Spotting the novice adventurers, the demon leaders mockingly praise their foolish guts for choosing to stand their ground. Squinting at the distant horizon, a demon notes that despite their fierce expressions, the humans' actual numbers remain difficult to gauge. Rogu sternly warns his comrade Ban not to drop his guard, noting that utter despair often turns cowards courageous. Ignoring the warning entirely, Bagay recklessly charges forward while boasting that he will simply burn all the humans to a crisp. Leaping high into the air, Lord Bagay obnoxiously announces his name and bizarrely declares his favorite romance trope to the bewildered adventurers. He aggressively unleashes a massive, roaring wave of destructive fire directly at the fragile human frontline. The roaring flames crash violently against a shimmering magical barrier summoned by the coordinated human defenders. Safe behind their protective shield, the adventurers smirk confidently at the monster's completely failed assault. Stunned that his fire was so easily deflected, Bagay is immediately ordered by Rogu to fall back from his rash attack. Stubbornly refusing to retreat, Bagay flexes his massive body and aggressively boasts about the raw physical power of his heavy tail. Confident in his brute strength, he violently lunges forward to deliver a devastating physical blow to the human ranks. His arrogant charge is abruptly halted when an impossibly strong grip suddenly locks onto his massive frame. Paralyzed by Perfimia's iron grip, a terrified Bagay panics as she repeatedly mutters her terrifying new grab-and-throw combat mantra. Screaming in absolute terror, the colossal demon is effortlessly hoisted high into the air by the young hero. With explosive force, Perfimia violently slams the massive beast directly into the hard, unforgiving dirt. The surrounding adventurers cheer enthusiastically at the spectacular, earth-shattering takedown. Witnessing the brutal defeat, the remaining demonic vanguard recoils in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. A stunned demon commander stammers in horror, completely unable to process that Bagae was annihilated in a single, devastating strike. Rogu suddenly senses a presence behind him and calmly asks the famous human adventurer to introduce himself. Standing with his weapon drawn, the legendary silver-ranked knight proudly introduces himself as Misteltum. Misteltum coldly cuts off Rogu's own introduction, flatly stating he has absolutely no interest in learning the names of the dead. In a blinding flash of silver light, Misteltum effortlessly executes his signature high-speed, lethal slash. Collapsing into bloody pieces, the dying demonic commander pathetically sputters out his name and his weird obsession with pantyhose before perishing. Empowered by their leader's incredible victories, the human vanguard aggressively charges forward to clash with the demon army. Coordinating flawlessly, the seasoned warriors command the strong to lead the charge while prioritizing the protection of the wounded. Roaring with newfound courage, the human adventurers clash violently against the massive wave of demonic infantry. Inspired by the overwhelming momentum, an older warrior joins the fray as the adventurers rapidly thin the enemy ranks. Suddenly, a much larger elite demon steps into the fray, completely unfazed by the desperate human weapons. Catching a blade with its bare hands, the monstrous elite mockingly asks if that pathetic strike was actually meant to be an attack. Before the human can react, the elite demon ruthlessly counters, declaring it will show them what a real attack looks like. A massive, devastating blow violently sends Mackenzie flying backward through the air. The veteran adventurer crashes heavily into the blood-stained dirt, completely incapacitated by the overwhelming strike. Horrified by his sudden defeat, the surrounding adventurers scream Mackenzie's name in sheer panic. Misteltum immediately barks an order for Sharon to provide emergency healing while the Saintess rapidly rushes to the fallen warrior's side. Seizing the opening, another powerful human fighter suddenly launches a fierce surprise attack directly at the elite demon's blind spot. Staggering backward from the unexpected strike, the enraged elite demon aggressively demands to know the identity of its new challenger. Standing confidently with weapon in hand, the brave human bluntly scoffs at the demand, refusing to give the monstrous invader any respect. A sudden exclamation of surprise breaks the tension as the monstrous enemy notices a new challenger. The monstrous woman drools over the handsome shielded adventurer, hungrily declaring she wants to eat him up. Licking her lips, she fixates on her prey with a predatory and sickeningly sweet gaze. An adventurer angrily yells at the monstrous woman, calling her a savage barbarian. A sudden, brutal attack violently strikes the shouting adventurer down. Another warrior cries out in shock as the battlefield descends into utter chaos. Mocking them, she admires her own twisted beauty and sarcastically offers her victim a mirror. Seizing the moment, Misteltum orders Perfimia to execute her signature grab-and-throw technique. Lunging forward with explosive speed, the young hero fiercely locks onto the towering demon. The immobilized demon arrogantly assumes Perfimia is captivated by her charm before realizing she cannot move. Screaming fiercely, Perfimia forcefully hoists the massive demon high into the air. A heavy grunt escapes the demon as she is violently slammed into the unforgiving ground. Scraping against the dirt, the monstrous woman rapidly slides backward to recover her footing. A desperate shout echoes across the battlefield as the young hero is suddenly targeted. Misteltum steps in with blazing speed, launching a powerful counterattack to protect his student. The silver-ranked knight unleashes a dazzling, high-speed sword technique directly at the monstrous enemy. Smiling wickedly, the demon counters the blinding slash with a devastating blast of roaring flames. The terrifying collision of light and fire creates a massive, earth-shattering explosion across the battlefield. Thick smoke rapidly billows through the air, completely obscuring the devastating aftermath of the blast. The heavy smoke clears to reveal the human defenders violently thrown to the scorched earth. A horrified cry rings out as the scattered and battered heroes struggle to rise. Emerging from the swirling dust, a massive and highly intimidating demonic figure steps confidently forward. The towering monster glares down at the defeated humans with absolute, crushing malice. A terrified adventurer weakly stammers, utterly paralyzed by the overwhelming demonic presence. The fearsome creature fully reveals its imposing, draconic form to the trembling survivors. Mocking their terror, the beast casually introduces himself as Gidragan to the screaming humans. He passionately roars that he is a proud warrior who lives solely to serve Brazel. Smirking wickedly, he formally declares his grand title as the Lizardan General. The horrified humans instantly recognize him as Brazel's legendary second-in-command. Gidrigan furiously corrects them, screaming that he is now the first subordinate after Bastaline's death. Spotting a young girl among the wreckage, Gidrigan's cruel eyes lock directly onto Sharon. Recognizing her priestess robes, he wickedly notes that she belongs to the Aguria sect. He casually complains that high-level human healers are incredibly annoying to deal with during battles. Glaring down with dark intent, the monstrous general calls out directly to the trembling saintess. Confirming her holy status, he brutally promises to crush her to death without hesitation. The battered adventurers watch in absolute, helpless despair as the monster targets their beloved healer. A desperate scream violently echoes through the air in a futile attempt to stop him. Gidrigan violently swings his massive claws down toward the defenseless saintess with lethal force. Right before the fatal impact, a mysterious blur of motion violently intercepts the deadly strike. A familiar cloaked figure effortlessly catches the devastating attack, standing firmly before the terrified girl. Tears of absolute relief flood Sharon's eyes as she softly breathes Capua's name. Coughing violently, Capua suddenly staggers onto the chaotic battlefield, catching everyone completely off guard. Sharon watches in sheer shock as the exhausted adventurer violently gasps for air. Unable to stand any longer, Capua heavily collapses onto his hands and knees. Muttering a desperate plea for a timeout, he breathlessly admits that he is entirely too tired to function. Completely drained of energy, Capua slumps face first onto the hard dirt. Flashing back to several hours ago outside Noville, Capua is shown finishing his grueling magical task. Heaving a heavy sigh of absolute exhaustion, he grimly declares that the endless work is finally over. His demonic subordinates shower him with praise, noting he single-handedly revived 7,000 souls to reach their 10,000 quota in record time. The grateful trio assures him they will handle the actual delivery of the goods and urges him to rest. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Capua turns back to call out to his subordinate Rito. An annoyed Izu corrects his former master's name mix-up, though Capua lazily brushes it off as unimportant. Shifting to serious matters, Capua demands to know exactly where Brazel plans to launch his next massive war. Izu tilts his head in total confusion, surprised that they somehow forgot to mention the target location. Dropping a massive bombshell, Izu casually reveals that the upcoming war is starting right here in Noville. Panicking instantly, Capua screams for them to hold on while Izu casually adds that the Flame Army is already gathering in the west. Capua desperately demands why Brazel's strongest forces are attacking a random countryside, prompting Izu to explain it is retaliation for defeating the remade Hydrolord. Izu casually details how a furious Brazel burned through high-level transfer magic to instantly deploy his massive troops. Cursing Brazel as a total idiot, Capua's blood runs cold as he processes the terrifying cost of such high-level spellcasting. Rapidly doing the dark math, he realizes that teleporting an army of 20,000 requires an equal number of massive sacrifices. A sickening realization washes over him as he deduces the only available fuel source must be demon lives. Capua pieces together the horrific truth that the 10,000 demons he just revived will immediately be used as cannon fodder or magical sacrifices. Absolutely furious, Capua realizes his grueling half-day of paperwork actively helped Brazel engineer the destruction of his own peaceful town. A terrifying aura of dark magic violently erupts from Capua as unbridled rage consumes his entire being. Kicking off the ground with explosive force, he dashes away at blinding speeds. The stunned subordinates watch in absolute disbelief as they realize Capsodia is rushing straight toward the deadly battlefield. Sprinting away, Capua tosses a small object behind him and formally entrusts the remaining tasks to his former team. Rito catches the mysterious item, staring down at it in mild confusion. Realizing Capua left them a one-way ticket, the trio sweat drops at the prospect of having to walk all the way back. They silently watch their former commander's silhouette rapidly vanish into the distance. Izu marvels at Capua's terrifying endurance, astounded that he can still move so fast after manually reviving 7,000 demons. Acknowledging his overwhelming magical power, they agree that the rumors branding Capsodia as the weakest heavenly monarch are completely false. Inspired by their resilient master, the trio enthusiastically rallies together and vows not to let him down. Snapping back to the present battlefield, Capua stands firmly as a protective shield between Sharon and the monstrous Gidrigan. Smirking wickedly at the sudden interception, Gidrigan mockingly wonders if facing a familiar face here is simply destiny. The massive Lizardan general narrows his eyes as he gauges the impressive physical strength blocking his lethal strike. Pressing his overwhelming weight forward, Gidrigan attempts to crush the interloper into the dirt. Unfazed by the tremendous pressure, Capua coldly glares back and easily holds his ground. A terrified Perfimia desperately screams for Capua to run, frantically warning him that the towering general is an unbeatable monster. Gidrogan scoffs at the annoying human girl, though he finds her desperate warning highly amusing. Chuckling darkly, the demonic general finally connects the dots and sadistically asks if the human alias Capua belongs to none other than Capsodia. Gidrogan realizes Capua has been secretly hiding within a human city all this time. Laughing maniacally, Gidrogan mocks Capsodia for choosing to hide in a densely populated human settlement instead of the remote wilderness. The demonic general violently brands his former comrade as nothing more than a pathetic traitor. Unfazed by the insult, Capua calmly states that he only desires a peaceful life regardless of who he lives alongside. Scoffing at the peaceful sentiment, Gidrogan accuses him of merely putting up a tough front. Screaming with absolute malice, the monster declares that such a peaceful existence is completely impossible. He arrogantly gestures toward the massive horde of 10,000 demonic reinforcements that just materialized on the battlefield. Boasting about his overwhelming numbers, Gidrogan calculates that their combined forces now total a staggering 15,000 troops. Glaring down at the exhausted hero, the general challenges Capua to genuinely believe he can survive such impossible odds. Capua stares blankly at the massive army, silently processing the horrifying reality of the 10,000 newly revived demons. Acknowledging his former comrade's power, Gidrogan admits that Capsodia's death magic is undeniably lethal. However, he quickly points out that casting instant death on an entire army would completely drain Capua's remaining magical reserves. Gidrogan confidently predicts that the sheer numbers will crush the exhausted demigod before he can ever secure a victory. Roaring with unbridled bloodlust, the general vows to slaughter every single human on the battlefield. He threatens to violently burn Capua's beloved new home completely to the ground. Driven by absolute malice, Gidrogan promises to reduce the entire civilization to a pile of smoldering ash. His twisted intentions escalate as he targets Sharon with dark, sickening promises. Unleashing his terrifying aura, the monster screams for everyone to simply lay down and die. A sudden, overwhelming surge of dark magical energy violently erupts directly from Capua's exhausted body. Caught completely off guard, the demon horde wails in absolute agony as lethal magic effortlessly shreds through their ranks. Capua calmly explains that his demonic nature allows him to use a corpse contract to cast devastating death magic with almost zero energy cost. He notes that the terrifyingly efficient power comes with severe penalties, such as permanently locking his level. As Gidrogan realizes this is exactly why Capsodia remained at level 1, Capua smoothly asks how long the general plans to stay in his current form. Utterly bewildered by the strange question, Gidrogan stares back in sudden, paralyzing confusion. A massive pillar of dark energy violently consumes the towering general in an instant. Realizing his imminent demise, Gidrogan screams in absolute terror and begs for the magic to stop. Vain to the bitter end, the monstrous commander desperately pleads for Capua to spare his incredibly fantastic body. A final, blood-curdling shriek echoes across the battlefield as the overwhelming spell takes full effect. Staring in sheer horror, Gidrogan watches helplessly as his physical form rapidly deteriorates into nothingness. A final gasp escapes his lips as his consciousness fades entirely. Capua coldly condemns the fallen commander directly to the deepest depths of hell. The once chaotic battlefield falls completely silent as the terrifying display of absolute power concludes. Looking out over the devastated army, Capua sighs heavily, realizing he just slaughtered the exact same troops he spent hours reviving. Dropping to his knees, the exhausted hero violently gasps for air as the adrenaline finally wears off. A wave of pure administrative dread washes over him as he anticipates having to process all 15,000 resurrections by himself. A soft groan breaks the silence as a nearby adventurer finally begins to regain consciousness. Opening his eyes, Misteltum stares in absolute disbelief at the completely annihilated demon army. The legendary knight spots Capua trembling on the ground, seemingly overwhelmed by deep emotional trauma. Moved by the sight, Misteltum softly whispers his savior's name with profound reverence. Completely misunderstanding the situation, Misteltum assumes the saintly hero is weeping tears of immense sorrow for the fallen enemies, oblivious to Capua's actual dread over impending paperwork. The townsfolk gaze up in absolute awe, praising Capua as a merciful and true holy figure. Clasping their hands in prayer, they fervently thank the heavens for blessing them with such a noble hero. Overwhelmed by his greatness, a young adventurer whispers a desperate wish to one day work under Capua's direct command. Suddenly, Capua notices Sharon stirring awake and gently calls out her name, causing her to jump slightly. Recognizing the lingering fear in her eyes, he softly invites her closer while acknowledging how terrified she must have been. Assuring her that she no longer needs to pretend to be strong, Capua warmly accepts her emotional thanks. Comforting the young saintess of prophecy, he praises her bravery on the terrifying battlefield while she humbly credits the entire town for supporting her. Bursting into tears, Sharon buries her face into his chest as Capua affectionately pats her head, internally noting how young she truly is. The tender moment is abruptly shattered by a loud, whining voice echoing from a distance. Capua looks up just in time to see Perfimia rocketing toward him. Perfimia violently tackles him into a bone-crushing hug, leaving a suffocating Capua to desperately wheeze that he is actually dying. Ignoring his pleas, Perfimia cheerfully declares that being full of life is just her nature. Capua begs her to let go while she enthusiastically praises him for annihilating the massive lizard dragon in an absolute instant. The surrounding adventurers gather in sheer amazement, openly wondering how he managed to single-handedly destroy both the demonic army and the Hydra Lord. Eager to share the details, Perfimia proudly announces that she witnessed his incredible technique with her own 2 eyes. Internal panic wildly consumes Capua as Perfimia mimics his stance, realizing that exposing his prohibited death magic will instantly banish him from the entire human realm. As Perfimia describes the enemy forces dropping instantly, Capua desperately realizes he must act immediately to cover up the dark truth. Interrupting her with a bold lie, Capua loudly proclaims that his ultimate attack was actually just an incredibly powerful finger flick. Perfimia freezes in absolute bewilderment as he casually insists that a mere flick possessed enough force to decimate 10,000 troops. The ridiculous claim spreads through the crowd, leaving the adventurers stunned that such a cataclysmic victory came from a single finger. Completely misinterpreting the lie, the crowd assumes Capua is simply so powerful that a massive lizardan army genuinely only requires a casual flick to defeat. The town square violently erupts into deafening cheers as the citizens blindly accept the absurd explanation. Capua sweats profusely, silently questioning the logic of humanity as they passionately praise him as the legendary wielder of the miraculous flick. Riding the wave of absolute euphoria, a hyped-up adventurer enthusiastically suggests throwing their savior into the air to celebrate. A mob of joyful citizens instantly swarms the bewildered demon, eagerly stripping his shoes while chanting his praises. Utterly defenseless against their bizarre celebratory traditions, Capua lets out a confused yelp as they hoist him up. The massive crowd collectively readies themselves before loudly thanking him for saving their entire city from total annihilation. Launched high into the sky amidst roaring cheers of banzai, a terrified Capua internally screams that human beings are absolutely horrifying. A furious demon screams at Brazel, demanding to know how 20,000 troops were annihilated instead of destroying the town. Trembling nervously, a subordinate explains that the silver-ranked heroes Misteltum and Veldana were actively defending Noville. Another terrified demon shakes uncontrollably, bizarrely wishing she was a lowly mother so the world would be peaceful. The nervous demon shrinks back in absolute fear as the heavy tension in the room continues to escalate. Continuing the report, the subordinate adds an unconfirmed rumor that the Saintess of Prophecy and her chosen hero were also present. Brazel's eyes widen in sheer shock as he processes the unexpected involvement of a legendary hero. A wicked smirk quickly spreads across his face as he declares his intention to personally handle this newly interesting threat. His arrogant boasting is suddenly interrupted by a calm, commanding presence entering the chaotic room. Brazel glances over his shoulder as a familiar voice quietly calls out his name from the shadows. Ruviana steps forward, fixing him with a cold and entirely unimpressed glare. She flatly informs him that the Lady Demon Lord has officially summoned him to her throne. Brazel angrily accuses Ruviana of snitching, but she coldly dares him to ask the Demon Lord directly if he actually has the guts. Sighing in disappointment, she bluntly calls him an idiot who should have known his reckless actions would lead to this exact consequence. Clicking his tongue at her supposed mercy, Brazel begrudgingly agrees to go while Ruviana offers to accompany him. Ignoring his hostile attitude, she firmly insists that they will face the Demon Lord's wrath together. She emphasizes their unbreakable unity, determined to stand by his side regardless of the dire situation. Ruviana internally reflects that they will always stick together simply because they share a deep bond as childhood friends. Her thoughts drift affectionately to both Brazel and their absent comrade, acknowledging the profound history tying them all together. A confused colleague asks where they are going amidst the mess, prompting Ruviana to bid him farewell as they depart for the throne room. Left completely alone, the bewildered demon quietly wonders why he was excluded from the meeting since he is also a childhood friend. Feeling the sudden, freezing sting of absolute isolation, he awkwardly contemplates just heading home for the day. Deep within the fortress, Brazel and Ruviana finally stand before the grand, imposing throne of the Lady Demon Lord. Kneeling respectfully, Brazel formally greets his master and mistakenly comments that she seems to be in high spirits. The Lady Demon Lord glares down with terrifying malice, darkly questioning if his eyes have completely failed him. She coldly corrects his foolish assumption, declaring that her spirits have actually plummeted to the darkest depths of the underworld. A sweating Brazel desperately apologizes for his impoliteness as she dangerously asks if he understands the reason for her immense fury. Stuttering under her crushing aura, he finds himself completely unable to form a coherent excuse. Unleashing a terrifying burst of authority, the Demon Lord violently commands the groveling commander to kneel properly. A massive invisible force forces Brazel to the floor as she furiously snaps that he never had permission to raise his head. Desperately seeking mercy, Brazel apologizes for losing her graciously gifted soldiers, prompting her to sarcastically ask whose fault the disaster truly is. Paralyzed by raw fear, he hesitates to answer the lethal, rhetorical question. The Demon Lord abruptly unleashes a violent wave of magical pressure, causing Brazel to scream out in sudden, agonizing pain. She furiously screams that the absolute failure belongs to Brazel and no one else. Regaining a shred of her dark composure, she ominously notes that the battlefield defeat is not even the full extent of his massive blunder. Pacing menacingly, she interrogates him about utilizing large-scale teleportation magic to instantly deploy his massive army. She brutally lays out the horrific math, pointing out that teleporting 20,000 soldiers required sacrificing 20,000 lives, resulting in 40,000 total casualties. Pressing her ruthless interrogation, she demands to know exactly how many sacrifices were burned to teleport the modified Hydrolord beforehand. A trembling Brazel weakly confesses that 5,000 souls were consumed, bringing the catastrophic total to 45,000. The Demon Lord coldly confirms that his entirely pointless, arrogant actions single-handedly cost their empire 45,000 vital military assets. Desperately trying to defend his disastrous logic, Brazel stammers that human prisoners were used for the sacrifices and that wraiths can eventually revive the dead. The furious Lady Demon Lord orders Brazel to stop messing around, completely baffled that he lost 20,000 troops without even scratching the human town. Trembling under her immense pressure, Brazel flinches violently as her terrifying aura fills the grand throne room. A heavy, suffocating silence descends upon the chamber as the absolute gap in their power becomes painfully obvious. Glaring down at the pathetic commander, she expresses total exhaustion with his stupidity before noting the recent drop in the Wraith's resurrection efficiency. She casually mentions that Capsodia's sudden disappearance is definitely a factor before sharply pivoting back to the main issue. Dismissing the resurrection problem, she coldly confronts Brazel about his unauthorized and arrogant decision to exile Capsodia. Stepping closer, she menacingly accuses the trembling Heavenly King of deliberately attempting to conceal his catastrophic military failure. Desperately sweating, Brazel stammers out a weak excuse that he fully intended to report the incident as soon as things settled down. Without a second of hesitation, the Lady Demon Lord violently hurls a thick stack of documents directly into Brazel's face. The heavy files smack him perfectly as she reveals that a secret informant documented every single one of his treacherous actions. She smoothly clarifies that neither Voganes nor Ruviana sold him out, as she personally dispatched investigators to verify the intel. Staring at the battered commander, she smugly points out that his fiercely loyal childhood friends would never dream of betraying him. Ignoring Brazel's desperate demands to know the informant's identity, she casually ponders if she should have appointed Capsodia as the leader instead. Brazel groans in sheer humiliation as the Lady Demon Lord brutally reminds him that he must first atone for his treason. Cutting off his pathetic protests, she highly praises Capsodia as a quick-witted and exceptionally competent subordinate. Declaring that his useless chatter will not save him, she unleashes a colossal wave of crushing dark magic directly onto the traitor. The overwhelming magical force completely obliterates Brazel, violently smashing his body into the unforgiving stone floor. The heavy throne room doors suddenly creak open as the terrified Resurrection Department managers nervously announce their arrival. The Demon Lord officially leaves the messy cleanup to them, prompting a panicked Izu to question if resurrecting such a mutilated corpse is even physically possible. The trio of bureaucrats trembles in absolute horror as they stare at the bloody, mangled remains of the fallen commander. A sudden, sharp call of her name causes Ruviana to flinch violently under the Demon Lord's piercing gaze. The Lady Demon Lord formally appoints Ruviana as the temporary leader and firmly entrusts the surviving idiots to her capable hands. With a final, dismissive wave of her hand, the supreme ruler officially orders the surviving demons out of her sight. Retreating from the suffocating throne room, Ruviana quietly walks down the dark, foreboding corridors of the demonic fortress. The heavy silence of the castle amplifies her grim thoughts as she continues her solitary march. Pausing by a massive arched window, she gazes out into the bleak demonic landscape while processing the absolute chaos. Her expression darkens with deep concern as the terrifying reality of their precarious situation finally sinks in. The tension is abruptly shattered when Izu bursts into loud, uncontrollable wailing about how utterly terrifying Brielle was. Sobbing messily, Izu laments, setting a terrible example for her subordinates until a colleague offers a slice of yummy cake as a reward. Izu instantly stops crying, her eyes sparkling with absolute joy as her childish demeanor takes over completely. Walking alone, Ruviana suddenly grips her own body as a sharp pang of emotional pain strikes her chest. She winces deeply, struggling to bear the crushing weight of nearly losing her foolish childhood friend forever. Steeling her resolve, she realizes there is still a very small sliver of hope remaining for their fractured squad. She cleverly deduces that as long as she and Brielle are still alive, their fates remain directly connected to that mysterious letter. Her thoughts shift to the physical intelligence report that the Lady Demon Lord weaponized earlier. The intricate details of the informant's letter flash through her sharp, calculating mind. Examining the specific clauses, she focuses entirely on the informant's ultimate demand for compensation. A fond smile graces her lips as she recognizes Capsodia's distinct handwriting, realizing the idiot specifically demanded lifetime forgiveness for capital crimes to protect them. The scene violently transitions back to the human town, where a massive crowd is aggressively throwing Capua high into the sky. The cheering adventurers roar with absolute delight, completely amazed that they have successfully tossed their beloved hero for the 50th consecutive time. A heavy thud echoes as a wooden cup is violently slammed down onto the tavern table. Sweaty and utterly exhausted, an old man collapses in complete defeat after a fierce drinking contest. The tavern erupts into wild cheers as the lively crowd declares the victorious newcomer an absolute monster. Smiling awkwardly, Capua secretly admits his low tolerance while noting that human alcohol is surprisingly weak. A heavily intoxicated Perfimia clings tightly to her master, cheerfully praising his incredible drinking skills. Suffocating under her crushing grip, Capua desperately begs the reeking girl to let him go before he dies. Leaning in with a drooling smile, the drunk hero bizarrely offers to lick him all over as a special reward. Misteltum completely ignores Capua's frantic pleas for salvation, casually waving goodbye as he heads for the exit. Veldana excitedly agrees to leave, brightly announcing that her precious yeast is eagerly waiting for them at home. She passionately invites everyone to the grand opening of their newly named bakery tomorrow, promising to bake the most delicious bread. Sharon approaches with a gentle smile to check on him while Capua continues his desperate struggle to pry Perfimia off. Reaching his absolute limit, Capua desperately begs the Saintess for a lifeline just as she turns to ask him a question. Capua freezes in pure shock as an uncharacteristically bold Sharon leans in and asks if he wants to look at her chest. Furiously threatening to obliterate whoever gave the underage Saintess alcohol, Capua is instantly dumbfounded when a bystander points out she only drank grape juice. Staring up with flushed cheeks, an incredibly bold Sharon softly breathes his name while leaning dangerously close. Panicking entirely, Capua violently screams her name in a desperate bid to stop her advance. He violently jolts awake in his bed, his heart pounding erratically from the incredibly bizarre and terrifying experience. Wiping the cold sweat from his face, he sighs in profound relief upon realizing the entire chaotic ordeal was merely a horrific nightmare. Pondering the strange dream, he awkwardly wonders if his prolonged human disguise is causing him to experience pent-up urges. Shaking off the weird thoughts, he decides to take it easy for the day and simply ask his disciple to bake him some fresh bread. Throwing off his blanket, he completely freezes upon finding Perfimia casually sitting right there in his bed. The absurdity violently escalates as a yawning Sharon pops her head out from under the exact same covers to wish him a good morning. Spotting the guild receptionist Carla lounging nearby, Capua mentally short-circuits while Carla groggily checks the time and decides to leave. Furiously demanding to know why his private room is suddenly filled with women, he glares as they casually greet him. One of the girls innocently explains that the incredibly hot night drove them to seek out his naturally cool presence. They easily defend their intrusion by reminding the bewildered demon that he explicitly asked them to wake him up for the upcoming ceremony. Still completely groggy and entirely confused, Capua mutters the word ceremony as the reality of the day begins to sink in. Outside under the bright morning sun, A massive and highly enthusiastic crowd gathers to celebrate their greatest savior. Standing proudly at a grand podium, the town official formally announces the bestowal of a highly prestigious new title. Completely zoning out to stare at the pretty sky, Capua barely registers the roaring crowd as he is officially crowned the mayor of Newville. While Capua continues staring blankly at the clouds, the sobbing citizens thank him profusely for saving them from the monstrous invasion. The joyful townsfolk praise their rather dull-looking hero while Perfimia excitedly jumps around to congratulate her master's new position. Panicking internally over the officials urging him to settle down permanently, Capua realizes he is rapidly being trapped by human society. Frantically weaving an excuse about being a wandering traveler, Capua declares his intent to leave, prompting Perfimia to excitedly vow to follow him. Sweating bullets, Capua aggressively glares at his disciple to silently demand she stay behind to protect the vulnerable town. Catching onto the intense glare, Sharon gently scolds Perfimia for being entirely unreasonable about abandoning her heroic duties. A tearful Sharon bids him a lonely farewell and begs him to be careful, leaving Capua internally grateful for her perfect intervention. Noticing Sharon's incredibly intense sadness, Capua awkwardly reassures her and promises to look after himself on the road. The emotional farewell is abruptly shattered when a frantic messenger arrives with urgent news regarding a powerful monster invasion. The messenger grimly reveals that while the heroes were busy fighting Vizag, another incredibly cruel beast officially breached human territory. Capua silently laments losing his home and his dog while an adventurer mentions a mysterious monster annihilating the demon territory border guards. A crushing wave of dread washes over Capua as he internally realizes that he was the terrifying monster who slaughtered the guards. Connecting the dots, an adventurer enthusiastically notes that this rumor perfectly explains the heavy guard presence in the neighboring town. Another townsman confirms the rising panic, stating that all surrounding settlements have drastically tightened security and established strict road inspections. Fearing the roaming monsters, Sharon suggests Capua should stay in Newville, but a companion gently reminds her they cannot hold him back. Conceding defeat, a devastated Sharon and Perfimia sadly urge Capua to be careful on his journey since his mind is already made up. The heavy, emotional farewell is abruptly shattered by a strange, tense silence hanging over the room. Sweating profusely at the thought of facing the inspection points, Capua violently shifts gears and screams that he is officially staying in Newville. Baffled by the sudden reversal, Perfimia demands an explanation while Capua nervously insists he simply cannot abandon the town during a crisis. Desperately covering up his cowardice, he boldly lies that he ultimately chose to stay because he could not bear to see two girls crying. The flawless excuse works perfectly as Sharon and Perfimia gaze up at him with sheer, starry-eyed admiration. When a skeptic wonders if Capua is just scared, the crowd aggressively shuts him down by declaring the sacred maiden's tears successfully moved the legendary warrior. Overwhelmed by absolute joy, Perfimia launches herself across the room with a massive, wailing cry for her beloved master. Capua effortlessly dodges her tackle, bluntly demanding she capture him in actual combat instead of sneaking into his bed if she wants true acknowledgement. Taking his combat challenge entirely literally, Sharon suddenly wraps her arms around the bewildered demon from behind. Holding him in a firm but gentle embrace, a smiling Sharon happily asks if he will finally acknowledge them as his official students. Seizing the perfect opening, Perfimia aggressively dogpiles onto the trapped Capua before he can even protest the technicality. Pinning her helpless master to the floor, a smug Perfimia triumphantly declares herself an official student. Trapped beneath their overwhelming affection, Capua internally vows to ruthlessly overwork them and weaponize their blind trust to escape his pursuers. Sighing heavily, he grimly accepts that achieving his peaceful second life might still be a distant, incredibly chaotic dream. The wholesome moment violently shatters as Capua aggressively smacks Perfimia to stop her from doing something weird. A chaotic wrestling match violently erupts across the floor, leaving a thrashing Capua screaming for anyone to help him escape his overly affectionate disciples. Pinned hopelessly to the ground, the legendary demon desperately calls out for a hero to save him from his own students. A week after the intense battle against the Flame Army, peace finally returned to the town of Newville. Playing with a local child, Capua affectionately flicked her forehead. He inadvertently earned himself the playful, legendary title of Dekapin-sama among the townsfolk. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, Capua felt completely exhausted from his continuous hero duties. He mentally resolved that he urgently needed a solid plan to escape from Newville. He dreaded the thought of being trapped in the town forever. His thoughts were violently interrupted by a bizarre, booming voice. A bicorn demon appeared, loudly declaring himself the best gentleman in the demon army. The strange demon passionately confessed his absolute love for fragrant panties. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Capua immediately commanded the strange demon to stop. The bicorn paused, recognizing Capua as the legendary death scorpion of the heavenly monarchs. Capua nervously demanded to know what a demon was doing so far into human territory. The bicorn revealed he had received strict orders to ambush the royal capital. However, tired of waiting for further instructions, he wandered off to explore the outside world. Drawn by the scent of unmarried women, he proudly admitted to scavenging for underwear. The bizarre demon excitedly offered Capua a highly prized stolen panty. Calling Capua his comrade, he insisted they share the spoils of his twisted hunt. Disgusted and annoyed, Capua brutally struck the panty thief down in an instant. Sighing heavily, Capua lamented that he had accidentally saved the town yet again. He stared down at the defeated monster, questioning his former army's ridiculous tactics. Suddenly, Sharon and Perfimia arrived on the scene, armed with farming tools. They excitedly announced they were hunting down the rumored panty thief. Seeing the defeated bicorn, they enthusiastically praised Capua for efficiently capturing the criminal. The girls showered him with compliments, entirely missing his deep internal exhaustion. Driven to his absolute limit by the endless hero work, Capua internally screamed. He desperately wished to escape the agonizing death marches of his daily life. He silently counted on his loyal subordinate Rito to successfully execute his requested favor. A few days later, a highly anticipated parcel finally arrived addressed to Capua. Perfimia curiously noted how incredibly happy her master looked. She innocently wondered if the mysterious package was from a close friend. Opening the parcel in secret, Capua happily revealed a red mask. He recognized it as a special magic tool used by Pervers in the demon army. He confidently noted that wearing the mask would completely conceal his true identity. Thrilled by the prospect of freedom, he prepared his stealthy escape. Throwing on his cloak, he silently bid a final, joyous farewell to Newville. His stealthy departure was abruptly halted when a royal messenger suddenly arrived. The official announced a letter from the royal palace addressed to Sharon and Perfimia. Opening the letter, Sharon gasped in sheer shock at the unbelievable contents. She trembled with excitement as she read the royal decree aloud. She enthusiastically announced that Perfimia had been officially summoned directly to the royal palace. The chapter begins by explaining that with the royal palace's approval, a hero candidate is officially acknowledged as a true hero. Being chosen by a saintess practically guarantees becoming a hero, making the candidate title a mere formality. The group realizes they must travel to the royal palace to meet the other heroes and attend a magnificent investiture ceremony. Suddenly, Perfimia nervously calls out to her master while staring at Capua in pure shock. Capua, smiling wickedly beneath his hood, arrogantly declares his absolute victory over his circumstances. Internally celebrating, Capua rejoices that all his obstacles are gone and he can finally live an easy, magnificent life. Trembling nervously, Perfimia tries to get her master's attention as he continues to laugh to himself in the background. Snapping back to reality, Capua nervously apologizes and internally panics that he was acting far too delighted. Perfimia joyfully expresses how incredibly glad she is that her master is so happy for her success. The group cheerfully decides to grab something to eat to celebrate Perfimia's success before departing on their long journey. Suddenly, the heavy rumbling sound of an approaching carriage violently interrupts their peaceful moment. Capua spots a massive, ornate carriage carrying a mysterious girl locked inside a heavy iron cage. Pointing a finger directly at the saintess, the girl inside the cage boldly declares that she has finally found Sharon. Staring in complete bewilderment, Sharon recognizes the mysterious caged girl as Capua watches the bizarre scene unfold. The caged girl is formally introduced as Her Royal Highness, Princess Moriangela. The entire group screams in absolute shock upon realizing they are standing before an actual princess. Capua internally panics, wondering why a royal princess has suddenly appeared at the border just as he was about to escape. Setting his escape plans aside, Capua bluntly questions why a literal princess is locked inside a prison cell. Ignoring his confusion, the mysterious maid accompanying the princess simply flashes a cold, knowing smirk. Capua recoils in absolute horror as the bizarre reality of the situation rapidly escalates before his eyes. A sudden, terrifying magical aura erupts from the princess, completely startling the bewildered saintess. The princess dramatically announces she came specifically to meet Sharon, prompting the saintess to nervously ask why she is here now. Moriangela turns her intense gaze toward Perfimia, addressing the young girl as a leading figure in the flame beast subjugation. Flustered by the royal attention, a blushing Perfimia humbly denies being a leading figure. Unfazed by her modesty, Moriangela coldly declares that Perfimia is entirely disqualified from being a hero simply because she is too cute. The princess bluntly repeats that the hero chosen by Sharon is completely unsuitable, leaving Perfimia utterly confused. Sharon frantically screams the princess's name in pure shock as the bizarre accusation hangs in the heavy air. Ignoring the royal drama entirely, Capua's attention is drawn to the murmuring crowd that recognizes him as Sharon's follower. Cutting through the tense discussion, Capua loudly declares that he absolutely must check something before they proceed. Pointing directly at the carriage, he desperately demands to know why the princess is actively sitting inside a cage. The surrounding townsfolk nod in absolute agreement, admitting that the bizarre cage situation was bugging them too. The princess awkwardly stammers, trying to formulate an excuse while admitting the situation is hard to explain in a single word. Striking a confident pose, Moriangela bizarrely claims she is locked in the cage purely for the sake of aesthetics. She passionately rants about the firm, rustic bars and the cold floor, declaring it is the only place she can truly shine. Screaming dramatically, she insists she is locked in the cage simply because she genuinely wants to be there. Staring blankly at the maid, Capua sweat drops and bluntly asks if this weird girl is actually a legitimate princess. The maid smoothly confirms the princess's identity but adds the terrifying detail that her mind will collapse and she will turn into a giant ape if she leaves the cage. Completely shattering the illusion, Moriangela effortlessly picks the lock, steps out of the cage, and proudly points out she has not turned into an ape. Turning her arrogant gaze back to Perfimia, the princess calls her a little dog, to which Perfimia fiercely corrects her as being from the Crimson Wolf tribe. As Perfimia aggressively punches the air in frustration, the princess and her maid look on in pure disgust, questioning if this uncivilized girl is truly the chosen hero. The arrogant young girl is formally recognized by everyone as Her Royal Highness, Princess Moriangela. Standing her ground, Sharon confidently defends Perfimia as someone who is absolutely worthy of becoming a true hero. The princess sharply questions why the sacred maidens are traveling with such a highly suspicious male passerby. Sharon earnestly introduces Capua as their respectful teacher, while the maid warns them about spreading damaging scandals. Bursting into maniacal laughter, the princess completely mocks Sharon for blindly acting like a lifeless doll. Moriangela arrogantly reveals she came specifically to act as a chaperone to evaluate Sharon's controversial hero selection. The maid interrupts the royal rant to point out that Perfimia has already been officially summoned to the palace. Furious at the interruption, the princess demands silence and arrogantly places her royal authority above the kingdom's decisions. The tension escalates as the chaotic and overwhelming situation continues to rapidly spiral completely out of control. Crouching in the background, Capua internally curses the annoying brats and silently vows to send them to hell. A sudden, chaotic physical altercation occurs, resulting in Capua accidentally pinning the flustered princess to the ground. Capua freezes in absolute shock, his eyes widening in horror as he realizes the massive mistake he just made. Sweating profusely, the terrified demon frantically stammers out a desperate apology while trying to excuse himself. Staring up at him with tear-filled eyes, the deeply traumatized princess trembles in sheer, unadulterated panic. A deafening, wailing cry violently erupts from the princess as she completely breaks down in absolute terror. The chaotic wailing triggers a massive magical reaction, causing a bewildered Capua to panic even further. The maid coldly brands Capua a pervert for riding the princess like a horse while he notices a powerful barrier. Realizing the sheer scale of the magic, Capua desperately demands to know what the princess truly is. The maid smoothly reiterates that the crying girl is undeniably the third princess of the Cantabria kingdom. Dropping a massive bombshell, the maid proudly reveals that Moriangela is also the legendary saintess of barriers. The townsfolk excitedly point out that they have successfully repelled the demons and can now celebrate the princess. A man driving a carriage admits that he was completely bewildered by the chaotic situation at first. Meanwhile, Capua stands completely frozen in the background, sweating nervously as he realizes his dire predicament. He sarcastically notes how nice it is to be human while internally panicking that he cannot get out of the town. Capua realizes that a massive antidemon specialization barrier has been erected to cover the entire town. He deduces that if he tries to break the barrier with his magic, he will be instantly discovered by the humans. He notes that the only person capable of easily breaking such a high-level barrier would be the demon lord herself. Capua concludes that he must get the stubborn princess to acknowledge Perfimia as a hero so they can finally leave. He laments that the town is currently swarming with a hero and two saintesses, making any suspicious moves completely impossible. Elsewhere, Perfimia is undergoing a rigorous physical test in front of the royal guests to prove her heroic worth. The examiner notes that while her performance wasn't too bad, she failed to put enough of her waist into the movement. Enthusiastically accepting the constructive critique, Perfimia brightly shouts her agreement to try the physical exercise again. After the test concludes, the examiner proudly declares that Perfimia has officially passed the rigorous evaluation. The examiner turns to Princess Moriangela, expecting her to finally admit and acknowledge Perfimia's incredible strength. Without a second of hesitation, Moriangela coldly declares that Perfimia is completely disqualified and absolutely unfit to be a hero. A frustrated Sharon immediately protests, arguing that Perfimia has thoroughly displayed her overwhelming physical power. She passionately points out that her chosen hero even managed to defeat a silver-ranked warrior in live combat. Sharon demands to know what exactly the demanding princess could possibly still be unsatisfied with regarding Perfimia's skills. Moriangela dismissively states that a hero's worth is not simply determined by what powerful enemies they have defeated. Building dramatic tension, the princess boldly declares that the most important quality of a true hero is their overall impression. Capua stares at the princess with dead eyes, utterly bewildered by her superficial and entirely ridiculous criteria. Moriangela furiously argues that Perfimia's brute force fighting style of grabbing and throwing enemies is complete nonsense. She passionately insists that true heroes must always remain incredibly stylish, even in the midst of a bloody battlefield. Perfimia aggressively defends her brutal wrestling techniques, firmly declaring that this is simply her unique combat style. Refusing to back down, the princess challenges Perfimia by asking if she has ever actually saved a royal princess. Moriangela begins to recount her own tragic past, revealing she was captured by a ruthless slave merchant 10 years ago. She describes how she and the other captives were oppressed every single day under the merchant's cruel, unrelenting treatment. Flashbacks reveal the horrifying reality of the captives being mercilessly beaten with heavy whips by their evil captors. She explains that they were trapped and left to despair in the dark, dingy basement of an illegal gambling house. The listening group reacts with shock and deep sympathy upon hearing about the young princess's traumatic imprisonment. However, Moriangela's tone shifts as she reveals that a mysterious savior suddenly appeared in that dark, hopeless basement. She passionately describes her savior as a stylish, black-robed, masked hero who arrived just in time to rescue them. She highly praises the masked hero for offering his miraculous aid with a truly compassionate and noble heart. According to her starry-eyed recollection, the mysterious hero stylishly defeated all the evil guards in a single instant. Perfimia realizes the description perfectly matches Capua and fiercely defends her master from being lumped in with a masked pervert. Completely ignoring the argument, Moriangela loudly proclaims that being a true hero is absolutely all about using flashy magic. She stubbornly insists that her masked savior from 10 years ago is the absolute, unquestionable standard for what a true hero should be. Capua realizes with absolute horror that he was the masked hero who accidentally saved the princess a decade ago, while the maid smirks knowingly. Later that night at a tavern, an exhausted Capua angrily confronts the mysterious royal maid, calling her by her true name, Elite. Elite, revealed as Capua's old neutral demon friend, casually admits she purposely withheld information just to tease him for the first time in 10 years. At the tavern, an exasperated Capua complains that Elite is eager to extort him by ordering the most expensive drink. Elite ignores his complaints, cheerfully instructing the bartender while smugly asking what business the town's hero has with her. Panicking, Capua violently shakes Elite, frantically begging her never to say his real demonic name out loud again. Elite casually dismisses his paranoia, pointing out that humans in the countryside wouldn't recognize the heavenly monarch's names anyway. Shifting to the main topic, Capua awkwardly tries to discuss his problem while Elite notices his extremely distressed expression. Annoyed, Capua demands to know if she called him out just to tease him about their past from 10 years ago. He explicitly confirms with Elite that the arrogant young girl causing trouble is indeed the same princess they rescued. A flashback begins, revealing Capua infiltrating the Cantabria kingdom 10 years ago to gather military intelligence while wearing a mask. During this dangerous infiltration mission, his old friend Elite officially served as his knowledgeable guide through the human territory. Wearing his disguise, Capua successfully completed his mission without incident, confirming the kingdom's military strength for the Demon Lord. However, the Demon Lord also requested information on other human matters, such as sweets, games, and stock investments. As they prepared to finally escape the kingdom, Elite suddenly mentioned a mysterious secret auction house to Capua. Elite explained rumors that humans were actively buying and selling demons in the underground society for profit. Disgusted by the idea of humans exploiting his kind, Capua decided they should investigate the auction house for future reference. Upon arriving at the underground location, they were shocked by the horrifying scene unfolding inside the dark basement. Instead of demons, Capua found a young human girl being brutally whipped and oppressed by ruthless slave merchants. The cruel merchants mercilessly beat the terrified girl, declaring she had no human rights because she was merely a slave. Utterly disgusted by their cruelty, Capua instantly unleashed a devastating spell, coldly ordering the evil merchants to die. The powerful magical blast completely annihilated the abusers in a single instant, leaving the young captive completely unharmed. Stepping forward, Capua gently asked the crying girl if she was all right, initially mistaking her for a dark fairy. Taking a closer look at her features, he suddenly realized with absolute shock that the captive was actually a human. Overwhelmed with profound gratitude, the tearful young girl looked up at her masked savior and tenderly called him Hiro-sama. She wept openly, expressing her deep relief that her fabulous hero had finally come to save her from the darkness. Elite later explained that in the underground society, the word demon was slang for illegal, unpublishable human merchandise. Capua realized with sheer horror that his compassionate rescue mission had accidentally saved the kingdom's highly important royal princess. The princess's physical injuries were easily healed with magic, and she ultimately recovered completely from her deep mental trauma. However, Capua's incredibly stylish rescue left a permanent, exaggerated impression of a masked hero in her recovering memory. Returning to the present, Capua groans in absolute despair as he processes the massive consequences of his past actions. Elite teases him, asking if he called her out just to reminisce about their heroic past tales. Capua admits he desperately needs her help to get out of Newville because he is trapped by the town's barrier. He explains that he needs the annoying princess to leave so Perfimia and the others can finally become true heroes. While he could break the barrier himself, he knows Perfimia and the others would definitely get in his way. Therefore, he begs Elite to use her influence to do something about the stubborn princess and remove the obstacles. Elite calmly agrees that manipulating the situation to make the princess leave is actually a surprisingly easy task. Relieved, Capua eagerly anticipates his freedom, completely unaware of the steep price his old friend is about to demand. Smiling wickedly, Elite smoothly declares that she will absolutely help him, but she has a strict condition in exchange. She leans in with a predatory smirk, making it clear that her crucial assistance will definitely not come cheap. Capua sighs in profound resignation, bitterly muttering that he fully expected her to demand something outrageous in return. Defeated, he reluctantly tells her to state her condition, bracing himself for whatever chaotic demand she has prepared. Elite reveals her ultimate condition, demanding Capua don the red mask and present himself before Princess Moriangela. While Capua understands the plan, he is completely blindsided when Elite eagerly forces him to pay an outrageously expensive tavern bill. Elite instructs him to forcibly draw the line as the true hero the princess yearns for, ignoring Capua's complaints about Moriangela being in a dangerous area. Capua furiously questions why a royal princess is wandering around such a sketchy place to begin with. The waiter hands Capua a massive bill, while Elite casually mentions she has something else to discuss afterward. Meanwhile, a group of dangerous thugs corners the wandering princess in a dark, isolated alleyway. Stepping closer, the thugs mockingly ask what a little lady is doing in a place like this. Unfazed by their presence, Moriangela arrogantly demands to know who these lowly criminals think they are. Introducing herself with absolute royal pride, she warns them that her father's knights will tear them limb from limb, which only provokes their maniacal laughter. The thugs sneer that she only has herself to blame for wandering the slums while dripping with expensive jewels. As Moriangela furiously curses them, Elite coldly tells Capua not to face her so she avoids his demonic corpse breath. Realizing the danger, Moriangela suddenly panics and demands that someone immediately save her royal self. Breathing heavily, she frantically looks around for a savior as the criminals close the distance. Suddenly, she stops dead in her tracks, her terrified panting shifting into something completely different. Her fear morphs into bizarre excitement as she asks the thugs why their feet stopped moving. Sweating profusely, she enthusiastically asks if they plan to embarrass her and do terrible things. Thrilled by the danger, she steps aggressively toward her attackers, screaming for them to creep up on her more. She passionately demands they hurry up and put her in a genuine pinch. Erupting with terrifying energy, she violently screams at the top of her lungs. A massive, explosive shockwave violently blasts the thugs away as they scream in absolute terror. The criminals are sent hurtling through the air, completely overwhelmed by her erratic magical outburst. One of the defeated thugs groans in sheer agony as he crashes heavily into the unforgiving dirt. Moriangela stomps furiously on a fallen attacker, cursing him for his pathetic attempt at villainy. The terrified thugs scramble away, screaming that both the crazy princess and the hidden onlookers are incredibly bad news. Infuriated by their parting words, Moriangela screams after them, demanding to know what they mean by both of them. Stepping smoothly from the shadows, Capua finally reveals himself, fully clad in his black robes and iconic red mask. Moriangela turns around, her eyes widening in absolute shock as she softly breathes her hero's name. She stares in total awe, completely mesmerized by the sudden, miraculous appearance of her childhood savior. Overjoyed, she clutches her hands together and passionately cries out to her beloved hero. Unnoticed in the background, a battered thug groans and slowly rises, internally vowing to strike the crazy girl at least once. Completely oblivious to the danger, Moriangela passionately confesses that she always hoped to meet his esteemed self again. The vengeful thug suddenly lunges from behind, raising his heavy club for a devastating strike. Moving with blinding speed, Capua instantly intercepts the attack and effortlessly crushes the thug's wrist before the blow lands. Caught in an incredibly intimate, romantic pose, Capua internally sweats over the awkwardness while the princess blushes furiously. Realizing their compromising position, Moriangela gasps and frantically apologizes for her indecent behavior. Her heart pounding wildly, she desperately asks the masked hero if he has some spare time right now. She insists he absolutely must meet Sharon, describing the saintess as an impertinent younger sister type who needs guidance. She explains that despite being a holy figure, Sharon has always been an insecure child with zero confidence. Capua silently agrees that Sharon used to be exactly like that, while Moriangela boasts about her duty to impart royal wisdom to the poor girl. Pouting dramatically, the princess laments that Sharon somehow managed to find a hero before she did. Dismissing everything else, Princess Moriangela happily declares that she has finally found her true hero. Laughing maniacally, she proclaims that all is well that ends well since she no longer cares about anything else. Capua internally groans, desperately praying for this bizarre and exhausting situation to end quickly. Grabbing Capua by the arm, Moriangela excitedly commands Sharon to look at her designated true hero. Sharon and Perfimia stare in sheer shock at the masked man standing silently beside the princess. Capua sweats profusely, completely dumbfounded that his own disciples failed to recognize the man they ate bread with just that morning. He internally questions the effectiveness of his disguise, wondering exactly what kind of mysterious figure he appears as to this clueless bunch. Striking a dramatic pose, Moriangela officially declares her grand intentions to the bewildered saintess. The princess boldly announces that she will take this masked hero to the royal palace instead of Perfimia. Sharon and Perfimia freeze in absolute disbelief at the outrageous royal proclamation. A furious Capua mentally screams at Elite, realizing this kidnapping plot completely ruins his plan to quietly disappear. Standing safely in the background, a smug Elite secretly rejoices that her chaotic scheme is progressing perfectly. Glaring at his old friend, Capua bitterly curses the hedonistic woman for manipulating the situation. Recovering from her shock, Perfimia firmly argues that the princess cannot simply steal their royal summons. Sharon passionately agrees, insisting that this tyrannical decision is completely unfair no matter how you look at it. Moriangela meets their desperate protests with a cold, heavily intimidating glare. Ordering Sharon to shut up instantly, the princess claims she is only doing this out of genuine concern for the young saintess. Acknowledging Perfimia's combat skills, Moriangela bluntly states that a bloody battlefield is absolutely no place for a young child. Capua mentally agrees with the princess, acknowledging that sending a child into a war zone as a prophecy-bound saintess is highly problematic. Stepping forward, Perfimia aggressively demands to know if the princess is calling Sharon unfit for battle. The air grows incredibly tense as Moriangela stares down the furious young hero. The princess confidently confirms her stance, explaining that it is customary for the hero and saintess to deploy together but Sharon is far too young. Pointing an accusatory finger, Moriangela sneers that a novice hero like Perfimia could never adequately protect the young saintess. Clenching her fists, Perfimia concedes that Sharon is indeed a small child, but her tone hardens with fierce resolve. She passionately defends Sharon's unwavering bravery, highlighting how the saintess never fled from the Flame Beast army and worked tirelessly to find her hero. Glaring fiercely at the royal princess, Perfimia warns Moriangela that continuing to disrespect their hard work will severely anger her. Moriangela falls completely silent, momentarily taken aback by the young girl's fiercely loyal outburst. Capua watches the escalating confrontation, nervously noting how incredibly heated the situation has suddenly become. Refusing to blindly follow Elite's dastardly script, Capua steps forward and dramatically addresses the stunned princess. Pointing directly at Perfimia, the masked demon formally challenges the young hero to a high-stakes match. Thrilled by the idea, Moriangela enthusiastically agrees that the victor of the duel shall earn the exclusive right to travel to the royal palace. The princess smugly warns Perfimia that losing the match means losing her hero status and forcing Sharon to return home permanently. A tense silence hangs in the air as Perfimia and Sharon exchange a deeply determined look. Stealing her resolve, Perfimia turns her fierce, unwavering gaze back toward the masked challenger. Bursting with explosive fighting spirit, Perfimia boldly accepts the challenge and the high-stakes conditions. A hidden Capua smirks mischievously beneath his mask, thrilled that his gullible students fell perfectly into his trap. He internally rejoices, planning to lose on purpose to cancel his palace trip and finally secure his peaceful second life. Capua bids a mental farewell to the annoying bunch and pushes to start the match immediately, but Moriangela suggests scheduling it for tomorrow afternoon. The princess smugly reasons that the delay will give the doomed duo enough time to say their final farewells. Capua reluctantly agrees to the delay, worried that forcing an immediate fight might draw unwanted suspicion to his true motives. However, he bitterly regrets this decision as ominous narration reveals that Princess Moriangela was subsequently kidnapped by an unknown assailant. The scene opens on a quiet, seemingly undisturbed location. Tension begins to silently build as the group processes recent events. The silence shatters as everyone screams in absolute shock that Princess Moriangela has been kidnapped. While a trembling Sharon denies the possibility, Perfimia glares suspiciously at Capua, who furiously signs that he had nothing to do with it. Stepping in, Elite calmly explains that Moriangela has always lived a life surrounded by constant danger. Elite reveals that as a saintess destined to become the Holy Queen, Moriangela constantly faces assassination attempts from jealous siblings. Processing the dark royal politics, Capua quietly realizes this perfectly explains why the princess previously ended up in a slave market. Looking down, Sharon fondly remembers how Moriangela was the only one who supported her when she first arrived at the palace. Tears well up in Sharon's eyes as she recalls the princess constantly encouraging her despite suffering her own silent hardships. Moved by the saintess's tears, Perfimia confidently declares that they are going to save the princess. Sharon hesitates nervously, prompting a confused Perfimia to ask why she is making such a worried face. Pounding her chest, Perfimia proudly proclaims that it is her absolute duty as the people's chosen hero to rescue those in trouble. Capua awkwardly coughs in agreement while Perfimia enthusiastically reminds him that they must especially rescue Sharon's savior. Turning to Elite, Sharon politely asks if they can request the true hero's assistance to strengthen their rescue forces. Elite casually glances over at Capua with a mysterious, knowing look. Bragging internally about his massive intellect, Capua assumes Elite is simply bored and helping him because he foiled her plans yesterday. Capua smugly concludes that Elite has yielded to him, while she smoothly lies to Sharon that the true hero has already departed. Sharon asks about Capua's involvement, prompting an excited Perfimia to vow she will work just as hard as the impressive true hero. Sweating profusely, Capua panics as Elite mockingly asks if he even requires her assistance at this point. Completely missing the tension, Perfimia cheerfully declares that she is plenty strong enough on her own. Cracking her knuckles with a fierce grin, the young hero tells her master to leave everything to her. Taking charge, Elite confidently instructs the group to leave the task of tracking the princess's whereabouts entirely to her. Throwing her fist into the air, an energetic Perfimia officially declares the princess rescue mission underway. Dropping to the ground, Perfimia begins intensely sniffing the dirt like a tracking hound. Proving her Crimson Wolf heritage, Perfimia confidently confirms that there are definite traces of the princess in the area. Sharon praises Elite's incredible skills for already knowing the kidnappers' identities and locating their hidden base so easily. Elite explains that her fellow Dark Elves excel in intelligence gathering by constantly exchanging underworld secrets across a vast global network. Sharon admits it was strange that the princess lacked guards, but feels incredibly relieved to have Elite's tracking expertise. Pointing toward the rugged terrain, Elite draws everyone's attention to a specific structure in the distance. A dark, foreboding cave entrance looms quietly against the rocky landscape. The rescue party cautiously approaches the sinister cave, staying on high alert. Noting the lack of commotion, Sharon wonders if the true hero arrived first, prompting Perfimia to ask for their next move. Elite warns that the cave is likely a relay point, meaning they have no time to wait before the princess is moved again. Understanding the severe urgency, Perfimia quickly agrees to push forward. Sharon watches nervously, her anxiety spiking as they prepare to breach the enemy hideout. Turning to comfort the trembling Saintess, Perfimia gently reassures Sharon by reminding her how much stronger she has become. Surprising the group, Elite humbly volunteers to enter the cave as well, suggesting even a lowly demon could be useful. Perfimia strictly orders Sharon to wait safely outside, while Capua quietly clicks his tongue in the background. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, Sharon bravely declares that she is going inside too. Ignoring Perfimia's warnings about the danger, Sharon firmly insists that being separated from her hero is far more perilous. Sharon tugs gently at Perfimia's clothing to grab her attention. Looking up with an incredibly cute expression, the young Saintess asks her hero for protection. Completely disarmed by her overwhelming cuteness, Perfimia admits it is entirely unfair but happily promises to protect her. Elite smugly notes that the orthodox hero-Saintess pairing makes for excellent Yuri, leaving an innocent Sharon totally confused about the flower reference. The rescue party swiftly marches deeper into the rugged wilderness to locate the kidnapped princess. Following the intensifying scent, Perfimia easily takes down a few scattered bandits guarding the outer perimeter. A sudden, furious shout violently shatters the silence from deeper inside the cave. Hearing the loud commotion up ahead, Perfimia realizes they have finally found Moriangela's exact location. The princess angrily screams at her captors to stop whatever they are doing to her. Bursting with bizarre frustration, Moriangela complains that their pathetic restraints are far too loose to hold her. Noticing a relatively clean bandit nervously introducing himself as a newbie, the captive princess questions if he is a magician. Sighing dramatically, Moriangela laments that her captors are far too incompetent to cure her boredom while waiting for her savior. Pouting with impatience, she looks toward the cave entrance and wonders why her true hero is taking so long. Taking total control of the situation, the princess begins actively teaching the baffled bandit how to tie proper knots. Praising his surprisingly good technique, the weirdly enthusiastic princess encourages the blushing bandit to practice his binding skills on her. The bizarre hostage loudly scolds the confused kidnapper for worrying about rope marks, demanding he tighten the bindings to enhance her twisted experience. The chaotic rope-tying lesson abruptly halts as another bandit excitedly interrupts them. A starstruck bandit suddenly begs for an autograph upon realizing they captured the legendary kidnapped princess, who casually reminisces about the rusty hideout. A blinding flash of explosive force suddenly violently shatters the bizarre hostage situation. Perfimia casually claims her hand slipped as the panicked bandits reel from the sudden, devastating strike. Moriangela's eyes light up with immense hope as the battered bandits scream over their fallen comrade who still refuses to let go of the autograph. Overflowing with romantic anticipation, the princess eagerly turns around to finally greet her beloved true hero. Standing firmly before the iron bars, Perfimia seriously addresses the rescued royal. The overwhelming excitement instantly drains from Moriangela's face upon realizing her savior is just the wolf girl. Moriangela openly expresses her deep disappointment that the true hero did not arrive, prompting Sharon to step forward and coldly excuse her own behavior. Without a single second of hesitation, the young saintess violently slaps the arrogant princess straight across the face. The stinging slap echoes through the cavern, leaving the princess completely paralyzed in absolute shock. The surrounding bandits and rescuers alike drop their jaws in sheer disbelief at the saintess's sudden, aggressive outburst. Still holding her stinging cheek, a bewildered Moriangela listens as Sharon formally apologizes for her highly uncharacteristic misbehavior. Glaring fiercely at the royal, Sharon firmly demands the chance to speak her piece. Accepting future punishment for the strike, Sharon fiercely demands the princess apologize and thank Perfimia for bravely risking her life to execute the rescue. Perfimia stares at her saintess in total awe, deeply moved by Sharon's fiercely loyal defense. Slowly processing the passionate demand, Moriangela gently touches her reddened cheek. The princess's arrogance finally melts away into a remarkably gentle and understanding smile. Acknowledging the unbreakable bond before her, Moriangela softly admits that Perfimia truly is a hero in Sharon's eyes. Bowing her head gracefully, the princess formally apologizes to Perfimia, who nervously brushes off the insult. Immediately regretting her own violence, a blushing Sharon bows deeply to apologize for losing her holy temper. Reassuring the young girl, Moriangela smiles and notes how surprising it is to see the usually timid saintess act so aggressively. Watching the wholesome resolution unfold, Elite and Capua observe the touching reunion from the shadows. As Elite tearfully praises the touching Tsunda moment, A deeply uncomfortable bandit politely interrupts the wholesome scene to ask if they can finally start fighting. Capua stares into the void of the dark forest, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down upon his shoulders. A sudden, ominous chill fills the air as an unexpected silhouette emerges from the shadows to block his path. Capua grumbles in irritation, realizing that his attempt to quietly slip away from Newville has hit a major snag. The flamboyant figure charges forward with reckless abandon, joyfully shouting that he has finally tracked down the hero and Saintess. The stranger strikes an absurd, dramatic pose, completely oblivious to the confusion he is causing among the party. Gonga introduces himself with obnoxious pride as a proud Dragonoot and intelligence officer of the Demon Lord's army. Sharon recoils in absolute disgust, immediately branding the boastful intruder as nothing more than a dirty pervert. Capua watches the scene unfold, his mind momentarily blank as the sheer absurdity of the encounter washes over him. He internally wonders if his extreme exhaustion is finally causing him to hallucinate during his escape attempt. Trying to maintain his composure, Capua takes a deep breath and reminds himself that he must remain calm to succeed. Checking his surroundings, he realizes the heavy downpour has driven the townspeople inside, providing him with a perfect screen. He takes this as a divine sign, deciding that the time to make his desperate move is finally here. The mysterious warrior laughs as he prepares to showcase the true strength of his position. Capua shifts his focus to the town's perimeter, recognizing the shimmering, formidable glow of a specially crafted barrier. He observes that the barrier is designed to pass all physical and magical attacks right through it, making it nearly impossible to breach. A confident grin spreads across Capua's face as he notes that even the strongest barrier is ultimately limited by its user's magic power. He reflects on how magical power acts as the core energy of life itself, harvested and sustained by both humans and demons alike. Capua steps forward, his aura shifting as he embraces his true identity as the legendary Death Scorpion and master of death magic. Raising his hand toward the shimmering wall, he coldly commands the barrier to shatter before his absolute authority. A wave of dark, concentrated energy ripples outward, tearing through the structure as if it were nothing but mist. The barrier dissolves into countless dissipating sparks of light, leaving the path to freedom wide open. Capua stands amidst the fading magical residue, his eyes burning with the cold satisfaction of a successful jailbreak. He scoffs at the failed attempt to contain him, declaring the entire elaborate defense a pathetic, meaningless joke. The cavern echoes with tension as the rescue party prepares for an intense clash. Staring down their eccentric opponent, the heroes brace themselves for a brutal fight. Focusing entirely on her combat rhythm, Perfimia silently repeats her mantra to go straight and throw. Building up terrifying momentum, the young hero dashes forward while cementing her straightforward battle tactic. Charging straight ahead with explosive speed, she prepares to launch a devastating physical assault. Leaping high into the air with a fierce grunt, Perfimia readies a powerful strike against the imposing Dragonoot. Gonga swiftly evades the incoming attack, arrogantly boasting that he absolutely will not let her catch him. Frustrated by his slippery movements, Perfimia growls angrily as Gonga mocks her for being an annoying little pest. Realizing they need teamwork to break his defenses, Sharon calls out to Perfimia to coordinate their next maneuver. Chanting a powerful holy incantation, the Saintess summons a celestial golden robe to bring forth a miraculous blessing. With a brilliant flash of divine light, Sharon successfully deploys a sturdy protection barrier around her vanguard. Smirking at their cheeky use of defensive magic, the arrogant Dragonoot immediately prepares a devastating counterattack. Unleashing a massive torrent of destructive fiery energy, Gonga viciously tests the durability of the Saintess's shield. The intense magical impact violently rocks the barrier, causing Sharon to groan in pain as Perfimia cries out her name. As Gonga laughs maniacally and demands a big squeeze hug for forgiveness, Perfimia frantically asks Elite if she has a backup plan. Elite coldly observes the chaotic battlefield, her sharp mind rapidly calculating the most efficient route to absolute victory. Chuckling darkly from the sidelines, Elite confidently agrees to proceed with their newly devised countermeasure. Unaware of the trap, Gonga proudly boasts that his iron-melting flames have surely roasted the girls alive by now. He arrogantly claims that no fragile human body can possibly withstand the suffocating heat trapped deep within the cavern. Scoffing at their presumed demise, the smug Dragonoot turns away and commands the weak humans to begone. Without warning, a blindingly fast silhouette violently bursts straight through the lingering smoke of the inferno. Gonga's eyes widen in absolute terror as he realizes his opponents survived the lethal blast entirely unscathed. Closing the distance in an instant, Perfimia prepares to unleash her pent-up fury upon the stunned intelligence officer. Anticipating her straight-and-throw tactic, Gonga smugly attempts a counter but quickly realizes Perfimia was totally faking her approach. Panicking as he realizes he was completely outsmarted, the Dragonoot frantically attempts to launch another magical strike. To his absolute shock, he crashes face-first into a perfectly timed magical barrier blocking his only avenue of escape. Signaling the captive royal, Sharon perfectly coordinates with Princess Moriangela to spring their ultimate, inescapable trap. With the enemy completely cornered by the barrier, Perfimia lunges forward with unstoppable, earth-shattering momentum. Wrapping her incredibly powerful arms around the terrified Dragonoot, Perfimia mockingly asks if this is the big squeeze hug he wanted. Trapped in her bone-crushing grip, Gonga shrieks in sheer panic and begs for mercy while ridiculously declaring his love. Screaming in pure, unadulterated agony, the mighty demon is violently slammed into the cavern floor with a devastating Daishuki hold. Battered and completely defeated, Gonga admits total surrender as the dust finally settles around his crushed physical form. Sharon rushes over to her victorious hero, while an exhausted Perfimia weakly slumps onto the ground with a soft meow. Wanting to heal her battered vanguard, Sharon offers her magic, but Moriangela steps in and insists the Saintess rest instead. Suddenly shattering the tender moment, the unbelievably resilient Gonga erupts into an obnoxious, booming laugh. Staggering to his feet, the Dragonoot begrudgingly praises their strength and admits they truly earned their victory over the Flame Beast army. Refusing to stay down, Gonga stubbornly declares that he won't let such a brutal hug slide, prompting Perfimia to question his ridiculous endurance. Stumbling forward with weak but unwavering determination, the bruised intelligence officer vows to finish them off once and for all. The rescue party gasps in absolute shock as Princess Moriangela suddenly steps directly into the path of the approaching monster. Staring coldly at the battered Dragonoot, a completely unbothered Moriangela smoothly asks Gonga if he is all right after taking such a severe beating. The princess boldly warns the imposing Dragonoot that another true hero will be arriving very soon. Stepping forward with absolute royal pride, she formally introduces herself as Moriangela Gig Cantabria, the legendary Saintess of Barriers. A stunned Gonga realizes she was the one who cast the powerful barrier, recalling that a hero is always accompanied by a saintess. Seeking to protect her companions, Moriangela proposes a high-stakes deal by offering herself as a substitute hostage if he lets the other three go. While her friends frantically scream for her to stop, the princess calmly notes that Gonga can refuse, but she can certainly buy enough time for the hero to arrive. She coldly promises the demon that if the true hero arrives while he hesitates, he will undoubtedly die. Pressing her advantage, Moriangela points out that securing at least one legendary saintess is far more beneficial than risking total annihilation. Weighing his limited options, a frustrated Gonga grudgingly agrees to settle for kidnapping her instead. As the deal is struck, a horrified Sharon desperately pleads with the princess to reconsider her sacrifice. Ignoring the protests, Gonga swiftly scoops up the captive royal and prepares to make his escape. Perfimia reaches out in absolute shock as the enemy bounds away with their precious VIP. Tears streaming down her face, Sharon screams for the princess to come back. The desperate cries of the young saintess echo helplessly through the cavern. The rescue party watches in complete despair as Gonga vanishes into the distance with Moriangela. Soaring through the dark sky, an exhausted Gonga sighs in relief that he secured a prize valuable enough to avoid a pay cut. His relief is shattered by a deeply unsettling, maniacal giggle coming from his supposedly terrified hostage. An incredibly excited Moriangela passionately strokes his rough scales, praising their wonderful snake-like coldness while Gonga recoils in pure disgust. Thrilled by the fantasy, the twisted princess dramatically wails about being violated while admitting she always wanted to be kidnapped by a dragon. A deeply disturbed Gonga begs her to stop, terrified by her bizarre energy and muttering about his non-blood-related younger sister. Suddenly, a massive unseen force violently interrupts their flight as Moriangela screams in midair. Gonga's eyes roll back into his skull as a devastating impact completely obliterates his consciousness. His massive draconic body goes entirely limp, plummeting uncontrollably toward the earth below. Slipping from his paralyzed grasp, a terrified Moriangela screams as she falls through the open sky. Meanwhile, a blissful Capua happily skips through the puddles of a heavy rainstorm, completely oblivious to the chaos above. Splashing through the mud with pure joy, the masked demon celebrates his long-awaited freedom. Reflecting on his exhausting past, Capua excitedly breathes in the fresh air of his newly liberated life. He eagerly plans to avoid cities entirely, dreaming of a relaxed, self-sufficient life deep in the isolated mountains. Throwing his arms open to the pouring rain, Capua declares that his perfect second life is finally beginning. His triumphant inner monologue reaches its peak as he leaps forward toward his peaceful future. Suddenly, an ominous, rapidly growing shadow violently engulfs the celebrating demon. Capua freezes in his tracks, a deep sense of dread washing over him as he senses something plummeting from the sky. Looking straight up, his eyes widen in absolute horror beneath his red mask. He screams in sheer panic as he recognizes Princess Moriangela falling directly toward his face. The princess violently crashes squarely into the bewildered demon, sending them both tumbling to the ground. Recovering from the impact, a starry-eyed Moriangela affectionately clings to the flattened Capua and praises her beloved hero. Completely misunderstanding the accident, she assumes he brilliantly took down Gonga in a single blow, while a traumatized Capua internally screams in confusion. Gazing deeply into his masked face, the blushing princess tenderly notes that he has miraculously saved her once again. Overwhelmed with romantic emotion, she softly asks why he constantly goes out of his way to rescue her. Reaching toward his face, Moriangela desperately begs the mysterious hero to finally remove his mask and reveal his true identity. Trapped beneath the lovesick royal, a completely defeated Capua stares into the void as his dreams of a peaceful life shatter entirely. Blushing deeply, Princess Moriangela begs to stay by the hero's side, admitting she is fully prepared and understands there must be a reason for his mask. She passionately declares that uniting with her fated one is inevitable, begging forgiveness for acting like a love-struck woman rather than a royal princess. Leaning in dangerously close with her eyes fluttered shut, she softly whispers that no verbal answer is necessary. Puckering her lips in romantic anticipation, she begs the masked savior to simply fill her lips with a kiss. A heavy, awkward silence stretches endlessly as the expectant princess waits with her eyes closed. Opening one eye in complete confusion, she softly calls out to the unresponsive hero. Staring blankly with a massive sweat drop, Capua bluntly asks if she was actually talking to him just now. Internally complaining that demanding a sudden kiss is blatant harassment, Capua casually admits he was ignoring her monologue to think about dinner. The blushing princess playfully accuses him of being a tease, completely ignoring his blunt declaration that he has absolutely zero intention of kissing her. Moriangela teasingly asks if he is unexpectedly shy, while an exasperated Capua mentally complains that human women are far too pushy. Capua internally curses his own rising embarrassment, begrudgingly admitting that despite her rotten personality, she is still an undeniably beautiful woman. Losing her romantic patience, a visibly irritated Moriangela demands he hurry up while Capua frantically calculates how to dodge the entire situation. Realizing that making her angry is his ticket to freedom, Capua's eyes widen as a brilliant escape plan immediately forms in his mind. Moriangela looks up in sheer confusion as the silent hero suddenly raises his hands toward his iconic red mask. Peeling the disguise away, Capua nonchalantly greets the stunned princess with a casual, entirely unheroic yo. The legendary mask falls away to reveal Capua's incredibly dull, plain, and thoroughly unimpressive true face. Moriangela's eyes widen to terrifying proportions as the grand romantic illusion violently shatters before her very eyes. The horrified princess unleashes a deafening, blood-curdling scream of pure, unadulterated terror. Capua ruthlessly commands her to take a good look at her hero's face, instantly shutting down her frantic accusations that he switched places with the real savior. Moriangela screams that her true hero could never look so filthy, perverted, and miserable, prompting Capua to angrily snap at the triple insult. Mockingly quoting her earlier romantic confession, Capua relentlessly torments the traumatized princess while she begs for mercy. Sighing heavily, Capua notes her stubborn refusal to accept reality as Moriangela violently rejects him as her fated one. A sudden, unexpected realization strikes the princess, causing her to instantly pause her frantic, tearful denial. Capua nervously sweats under her shifting gaze, desperately wondering if his brilliant plan to make her hate him just triggered the wrong emotional switch entirely. Looking down at her trembling hands, Moriangela questions the strange, unexpected emotion suddenly welling up deep inside her chest. To her own utter bewilderment, the princess realizes she is actually feeling profoundly relieved that this pathetic man is a fake. Recalling past moments of waiting for the masked hero, Moriangela wonders why she was always plagued by intense anxiety despite desperately wanting to see him. A dark memory flashes through her mind, showing a masked figure bluntly asking why she is so terrified of him. The heavy truth finally dawns on Moriangela as she openly admits that she genuinely was terrified all along. She confesses to herself that, beneath her romantic delusions, she was deeply afraid to finally meet her true hero face to face. Clutching her chest, The princess realizes she was terrified that the flawless, idealized hero living inside her memories would completely disappear upon meeting reality. The quiet revelation is violently interrupted as Capua suddenly pushes Moriangela aside and screams for her to watch out. A massive blade slices through the pouring rain as an armored knight attacks, immediately recognizing Capua as the exiled demon Capsodia. The knight declares the Princess Slayer under arrest, leaving Capua internally debating if he should just kill the attacker and become a wanted fugitive. Capua pathetically attempts to disguise his identity as a stingy pauper, but the furious knight rejects the lie by pointing out his uniquely miserable face. Still sitting in the mud, a confused Moriangela struggles to hear the knight mentioning the name Capsodia over the deafening roar of the rain. Watching Capua awkwardly dodge the knight's heavy strikes, Moriangela mentally critiques his atrocious, entirely unheroic movements. The princess closes her eyes amidst the chaos, deeply questioning what the concept of my hero truly represents to her. An ethereal image of the masked savior flashes in her mind as she warmly remembers him being resolute and incredibly kind. Infuriated by Capua's evasive mocking, the knight vows to slaughter them all, declaring he will start by killing the princess as the root of all evil. The armored knight ruthlessly accuses Capua of violently eliminating the competition because he hated the upcoming match. The heavy blade swings down with lethal force as the knight prepares to execute his devastating strike. Unleashing a sudden burst of deadly magic, Capua coldly commands his attacker to simply die. The armored knight shrieks in sheer agony as the overwhelming magical force completely obliterates his assault. Letting out a heavy sigh of relief, Capua completely relaxes his stance after effortlessly dispatching the royal threat. Staring up from the mud, Princess Moriangela is completely mesmerized by how her hero always protects her in times of absolute need. A sudden, intense realization washes over the love-struck princess as she rapidly pieces together his familiar combat style. Capua frantically debates whether to instantly execute the knight or use his death register to alter memories, fearing a high-level appraiser might discover his dark magic. Breaking his frantic train of thought, Moriangela excitedly asks if his devastating attack was actually just a simple forehead flick. Capua mentally curses his own carelessness as the princess triumphantly confirms she recognized the exact same forehead flick from a decade ago. Overwhelmed by absolute joy, Moriangela violently launches herself directly toward the bewildered demon. Capua screams in sheer panic as the incredibly enthusiastic princess tackles him into a desperate, crushing embrace. Crying tears of profound relief, she passionately declares that he truly is the legendary savior from her traumatic past. Ignoring his frantic denials, the blushing princess lovingly insists that he has absolutely always been her one true hero. Shifting her gaze, Moriangela curiously asks if Capsodia is actually his real, highly regarded name. Assuming his reputation is legendary even among the demon race, she excitedly asks for permission to intimately call him Capua. Blushing furiously at her own boldness, the love-struck royal passionately begs to simply call him her darling instead. While Capua stammers in utter confusion, Moriangela cheerfully announces that it is finally time for them to get going. The princess proudly declares that they are immediately departing for the Grand Royal Palace together. A look of sheer horror washes over Capua as he realizes the catastrophic implications of her royal invitation. Moriangela smugly cancels the upcoming match, officially recognizing both Perfimia and Capua as an unstoppable double-hero team. Completely paralyzed by the escalating disaster, Capua stares blankly into the unforgiving rain. Desperately attempting to correct her massive misunderstanding, Capua begs the delusional princess to listen to his dark truth. Resorting to his ultimate secret technique of brutal honesty, the masked warrior flatly confesses that he is actually a literal demon. Shushing his desperate confession, Moriangela giggles uncontrollably and playfully praises her darling for being such a wonderful joker. Capua completely short-circuits, utterly shattered by her absolute refusal to accept his terrifying demonic reality. Perfimia suddenly crashes onto the scene, prompting Capua to frantically dodge to avoid being crushed by the incoming hero. Spotting the defeated Dragonute nearby, an amazed Perfimia enthusiastically praises her master for effortlessly taking down the massive threat. Elite casually approaches the group, smoothly apologizing for her wandering princess who acts like a walking, royal nuisance. Turning to a deeply relieved Sharon, Moriangela respectfully apologizes and officially acknowledges Perfimia as a true hero. Blushing with overwhelming affection, the princess passionately declares that she has finally secured her very own legendary hero. Clinging tightly to Capua's arm, Moriangela proudly announces that she will take her beloved darling back to the royal palace. Perfimia and Sharon freeze completely, their jaws dropping in sheer, unadulterated shock. The entire rescue party erupts into chaotic screaming as the absolutely insane romantic development finally registers. Capua frantically argues that he is still in training, only for the ecstatic princess to vow she will follow him to the ends of the earth. Stepping into Capua's personal space, a highly intimidating elite shoots him a terrifying, expectant glare. The dark elf coldly pressures the cornered demon, demanding he absolutely accept the royal invitation to the palace. The love-struck princess gazes up at him with sparkling eyes, eagerly awaiting her darling hero's final answer. Trapped between a terrifying elf and a delusional princess, Capua groans in absolute, soul-crushing defeat. Capua begrudgingly surrenders to his fate while Perfimia frantically questions how her sketchy master suddenly became a legendary hero. Elite cheerfully signals their departure as a deeply confused Sharon desperately demands a proper explanation. Dragged relentlessly toward the royal capital, Capua silently weeps as his dream of a peaceful second life is completely obliterated.